Chained and helpless on a rug, Claire lies broken as the air crackles with a heavy tension. Smiling cruelly, the blonde Anephia mockingly asks her captive sister how she feels in her current state. Struggling against her heavy iron shackles, the weeping Claire desperately questions the reasons for this cold betrayal. Standing alongside a man in purple, Anephia tauntingly asks if Claire is still wondering why this happened. The man tells Claire she can ponder the truth while she continues to struggle in her bonds. A cold, mocking laughter rings out as the couple embraces, leaving Claire to suffer on the floor. Watching them together from the ground, Claire laments how her entire life has turned out so miserably. Trembling with a sudden rage, Claire's shackled hand clenches as she vows to kill her tormentors eventually. While the man kisses Anephia, Claire swears that even as a ghost, she will never forgive them. Anephia looks down with a triumphant gaze while Claire stares back with eyes full of bitter tears. Lightning illuminates the dark library as Claire wishes for a single chance to redo her entire life. Prone on the carpet, Claire weakly promises that she will definitely succeed in her revenge next time. A single tear falls from Claire's golden eye as she faces her final, lonely moments of life. The silent mansion suddenly fills with a loud, piercing laughter that echoes through the cold, dark halls. Reaching out one last time, Claire's final scream promises death to those who destroyed her whole world. A peaceful morning begins with a soft chirp sounding as the maid opens the grand bedroom curtains.
Marie greets the new day with a cheerful smile while releasing a bird from its golden cage.
Morning light floods the opulent bedroom as the maid announces herself to the sleeping Lady Claire.
Baron Estrella's second daughter, Claire, wakes up and exchanges morning greetings with her dedicated maid, Marie.
Moving with practiced grace, Marie tends to the birdcage while the morning sun warms the quiet room. Marie looks startled as if she suddenly remembered an urgent task for the young lady to attend.
The maid explains that the master has summoned Claire to his study and must prepare her quickly.
Claire sits up in bed, worriedly wondering why her father would call for her at this hour.
At her vanity, Claire thanks Marie for the news while the maid prepares to style her hair.
Marie smiles warmly, expressing her genuine pleasure in being able to help her mistress with such dedication. The room is quiet as Marie carefully brushes Claire's long brown hair before the important family meeting. Looking at her reflection, Claire expresses deep concern regarding the mysterious nature of her father's early summons. Marie addresses her mistress affectionately as Tia while finishing the final touches on her elegant morning appearance. Claire expresses her gratitude for the maid's kindness as she prepares to leave for her father's study. Before departing, Claire finds a brief moment of peace by gently holding a bird to her cheek. Entering the grand office, Claire asks if her father called for her, and he invites her to sit. Feeling a heavy tension in the room, Claire takes her seat and awaits her father's next words.
Jacob Estrella, the head of the household, asks if she has heard about Anephia's new marriage engagement.
He notes that while the match is prestigious, it is normally presumptuous for a baron's daughter. Standing by the window, Jacob explains that Anephia's free-spirited nature makes the current situation very delicate. Jacob's tone becomes stern as he commands Claire to watch over her sister until the wedding day. Claire falters, realizing the heavy burden of the task and the danger her sister poses to her. Looming over his daughter, Jacob insists that Claire must stop Anephia from causing any major family trouble. Claire panics internally, fearing the retaliation she would face if she ever tried to control her sister. Jacob grips Claire's shoulders tightly, warning that the entire household will be ruined if this marriage fails. Fear and despair cloud Claire's golden eyes as the weight of her father's cruel ultimatum sinks in. Anephia Estrella, the blonde eldest daughter, enters the room and greets her father with radiant, cold confidence.
Jacob immediately brightens, twirling around and praising Anephia for her constant and truly remarkable, peerless beauty.
Claire reflects on the unthinkable nature of Anephia's marriage to a partner of such incredible social status. The groom is revealed as Duke Edgar Townsend, who recently inherited his title after a sudden tragedy. Anephia's adoption by Margrave Tryon was a strategic move meant to secure the support of the Duke.
The childless Margrave couple took Anephia in specifically to facilitate her marriage to the powerful Edgar Townsend.
Surrounded by blooming roses, Anephia is described by her sister as a woman of peerless, captivating beauty. Her reputation as a famous beauty in the social circle makes her the family's greatest political asset. Narrating her perspective, Claire describes her blonde sister, Anephia, as a cold and ruthless tyrant. In a flashback, a young Claire with a stuffed bunny recalls Anephia reigning over their house. Looking on from the shadows, the young girl watches her parents lavish attention on her sister. When their mother asks if she's tired from partying, Anephia responds with a cold and dismissive attitude. Jacob warns Anefia about her engagement, but she retorts that she shouldn't have to suffer for it.
The mother bribes Anefia with a new necklace while Claire gasps in shock from the background.
Anefia demands a new feather hat as Claire watches, deeply troubled by her sister's greedy behavior. Trembling with hope, Claire reminds her parents they promised to buy her a book she wanted. A sudden, sharp clack sounds as a foot in a red shoe steps forward aggressively. Anefia raises her hand with a menacing glare while Claire stares back in absolute frozen terror. A loud, stinging slap echoes as Anefia strikes her sister across the face with brutal force. Anefia stands triumphantly over the falling Claire as their parents watch the violence with total indifference.
Looking down with contempt, Anefia calls Claire a useless shut-in and yells at her for interrupting.
While Claire holds her bruised face, the mother suggests calling the jeweler to distract the sister.
Jacob promises to buy Anefia many expensive things while Claire remains forgotten on the floor.
A quick departing step sounds as the family leaves Claire alone to suffer in the room. Looming over his weeping daughter, Jacob sternly asks if she finally understands her place in the house. Turning away, he insists they must keep Anefia in check until the day of her prestigious marriage. Jacob commands Claire to watch over her sister properly to ensure the household avoids a total ruin. Bitter tears fall from Claire's golden eyes as the weight of her lonely suffering becomes unbearable.
Night falls on a grand mansion where a glittering ballroom is filled with the social elite.
Looking around, Claire searches for her sister until a sudden quick bump sounding halts her progress. Stumbling with a startled gasp, Claire looks down as a man's voice politely offers his apologies. A handsome black-haired man leans down and asks the distraught young lady if she is hurt. The scene shifts back to the quiet night outside before Claire continues her desperate ballroom search. The black-haired man repeats his apology while Claire stares at him with wide, startled golden eyes. A sudden zoom sounding emphasizes the man leaning in close to the visibly flustered and blushing Claire. Looking away in a panic, a heavy blush sounding accompanies Claire as she insists she's perfectly all right. The man looks at her with a calm concern, noting that her face has turned very red. He wonders aloud if he might have bumped her too hard as Claire grows more embarrassed. Claire flinches back and shouts that she isn't hurt but was simply overwhelmed by the sudden embarrassment. The stranger watches her with a curious expression as she struggles to regain her composure in public. With her heart racing, Claire quickly runs away, leaving the confused man standing alone in the hallway. Moving in a frantic hurry, Claire rushes past other guests toward a set of large, ornate doors. Men gossip about a promiscuous princess, noting that her legendary beauty exceeds even the wildest rumors. The cruel gossip continues as the men laugh about the princess's lovers and the paternity of children. Reaching the doorway, Claire hears loud laughter and stops, breathing heavily as a sense of dread grows. Anefia is revealed lounging on a sofa in a private room surrounded by several doting men. A close-up reveals Claire's golden eye wide with shock as she witnesses her sister's scandalous behavior. A loud, heavy bam sounding rings out as Claire bursts into the room and calls for Anefia. Glancing over with a sharp glare sounding, the man with Anefia asks if this is her sister. Anefia looks away coldly, claiming she doesn't know the girl and calling her an unsophisticated child. The man suggests dressing Claire up, causing Anefia to pull him back and question his wandering eyes. Casting a mocking grin sounding toward her sister, Anefia pulls the man into a deep, defiant kiss. Pulling away, Anefia dismissively tells her sister to leave because they are busy having their fun. Claire trembles as she remembers her father's threat that the house will be ruined by Anefia's actions. Finding her courage, Claire begs her sister to stop and reminds her of the upcoming wedding day. A sudden, sharp shock sounding overcomes the men as the secret of Anefia's engagement is revealed. The suitors quickly flee to avoid trouble, while the brown-haired man sighs and prepares to depart. The man steps away from the sofa, walking past the devastated Claire as the room falls silent. Surrounded by thorns, the man bids farewell to Claire while Anefia prepares to confront her. Walking with a purposeful, sharp clack sounding, the blonde sister approaches the visibly nervous girl. A sudden, sharp slap sounding rings out as the blonde woman strikes her younger sister. Looming over her, the blonde sister warns that she will certainly make Claire regret her actions. Left alone with the echoing, fading clack sounding of footsteps, Claire breaks down into bitter tears. Moving through the empty hallway, the black-haired man searches for something with a focused, calm expression. He stops suddenly with a quiet gasp sounding upon discovering the distraught young lady in blue. Approaching with concern, the black-haired man asks if someone has caused her this visible distress. Terrified of more conflict, Claire pushes away and begs the stranger not to cause any trouble. The man watches silently as Claire continues to tremble with a visible, shaky shudder sounding. Seated amidst roses, the man gently tends to her injury, warning her about potential scarring. Looking up with wide golden eyes, Claire wonders why this total stranger is showing her kindness. He
He simply explains that offering assistance to those in need is a perfectly natural human response.
The atmosphere lightens as the man prepares more supplies to properly treat the young lady's face.
He notes that training often leaves him with wounds, explaining his practice skill with medical kits.
His deep blue eyes reflect a quiet intensity as he focuses entirely on the young lady.
He advises her to avoid dating anyone who would treat her with such callous and physical violence. In a moment of quiet reflection, Claire nervously asks the man why he was there tonight. She repeats her question, desperate to understand his presence in this secluded part of the mansion. With a sudden, sharp gasp sounding from Claire, he reveals he was looking for his elusive fiancé.
Her hands tighten with a soft, tense clench sounding as she timidly asks for the man's name.
Framed by a blue crest, he formally introduces himself to the shocked Claire as Edgar Townsend.
Recalling her father's words, Claire realizes with horror that this man is her sister's future husband.
In the dark carriage, the blonde sister rages against her sibling while nursing her own wounds. A dark intensity fills the scene as the blonde sister seethes with a silent, burning hatred. Wearing a cruel smile, the blonde woman decides that her cheeky younger sister must be punished.
The next day, Claire reflects on the prior evening's events with a weary, heavy sigh sounding.
She remembers Lord Edgar fondly, noting that despite his strict appearance, he was remarkably gentle. Clutching her chest with a tense, worried squeeze sounding, she hopes her sister might finally change.
A sudden, frantic dash sounding disrupts the peaceful garden as someone rushes toward the young lady. Marie runs to her mistress, shouting an urgent warning that something terrible has happened in the house. Breathless from a long panic dash sounding, the maid urges the confused Claire to follow her quickly. On the cold floor, the young lady's small pet bird lies motionless amidst a pool of blood. Claire collapses in grief, cradling her dead pet as her world once again falls into darkness. Approaching with a cold, dismissive step sounding, the blonde sister complains about the noise they're making. With a cruel giggle sounding, the sister blames the bird's death on Claire's failure to stay quiet. Moving away with a sharp, arrogant clack sounding, the blonde woman leaves her sister to her mourning.
Realizing this was a calculated retaliation, Claire weeps and repeatedly apologizes to her fallen, feathered companion.
A sinister narration notes that even this act of violence was not enough to satisfy her sister. The scene shifts to the hallway where a group of servants watches a tense, unfolding confrontation. Marie desperately protests her innocence, shouting that she did not commit the crime being accused of. A man points an accusing finger, claiming multiple people witnessed the maid touching the lady's bird. He emphasizes that the victim was Claire's most beloved pet, making the alleged crime especially heinous. Bursting through the doors, Claire screams for them to stop and not throw her maid away.
Moving with a desperate, frantic dash sounding, she tries to reach the group gathered in the hall.
The crowd reacts with a collective, startled gasp sounding as the young lady enters the heated fray. Releasing a terrified scream, Claire struggles against the man who suddenly grabs her from behind to interfere.
She cries out that Marie is innocent and explicitly identifies her blonde sister as the true culprit.
The grand hall is filled with tension as the servants restrain the distraught and weeping young lady. The staff whispers that Claire must be under a spell or simply being deceived by the maid. Desperate and tearful, Claire cries out that no one listens as she's forcibly held back. The servant restraining her insists she must be exhausted and urges her to remain calm. A man violently kicks the maid as Marie screams out for her mistress in terror. Claire is restrained in the grand hall while a sudden heavy bam sounding punctuates the chaos.
Descending the stairs, Anefia complains about the noise while her sister glares with tearful eyes.
Claire confronts her sister, asking how much more suffering she expects her to endure tonight. While Claire is held, sinister red eyes loom in the shadows behind the distraught young woman. Hiding her face behind a fan, Anefia is shrouded in an oppressive, dark purple aura. A sharp focus highlights Claire's eye, which is wide with an intense and growing horror.
Mocking her loud protests, Anefia walks away with a clack sounding, leaving Claire collapsed in pain.
Looming over her, the blonde sister cruelly declares that Claire is merely one of her toys. A new chapter begins 3 months later at the family's grand and sunlit white mansion. Claire narrates that the day of her sister's engagement has finally arrived, bringing eventual separation. During the garden party, Claire watches from afar as the elite socialites gather for the celebration. Anticipating her freedom, Claire watches Anefia drink wine while Edgar stands beside her looking deeply unhappy. The hopeful atmosphere shatters as a dark secret regarding the sister's unexpected pregnancy is suddenly revealed. Margrave Albert Treon bursts into the room with a crash sounding, shouting about the family's deception. He turns away in disgust, declaring that the adoption and the engagement are both officially canceled. The Margrave demands the immediate return of all his money as a hefty compensation fee. Jacob desperately pleads for the man to wait as the angry nobleman storms out of the room.
A heavy silence follows as the sisters stand alone in the wake of the total ruin. When Claire asks about the child's father, Anefia coldly dismisses the question with total indifference.
Claire worries about their empty coffers, but her sister remains unbothered by the spent fortune.
Anefia reacts with a sharp glare, screaming for Claire to be quiet about her spending.
Without another word, the blonde sister walks away with a rhythmic, sharp clack sounding of heels. Panicking over the mounting debt, Anefia stomps away, determined to find a way to escape quickly.
A sudden, sharp gasp sounding escapes Anefia as a dark and desperate plan begins to form.
Recalling a wealthy man's interest in Claire, Anefia decides to use her sister to pay debts.
She casts a final, calculating glance back toward the room where her sister remains standing alone.
With a sinister grin, Anefia considers Claire's newfound usefulness while shadowy bones reach for the girl.
Leaving with a final, mocking giggle sounding, Anefia retreats as Claire remains in the dark doorway. Claire enters a room with a heavy bam sounding, her expression weary after a long day.
Time passes as the family's mansion falls into a state of visible neglect and dark shadows. Shunned by society and burdened by debt, the parents face the consequences of their daughter's disappearance.
Unable to afford help, Claire is forced to work as a tutor for a young boy.
Returning home, she is startled as a heavy statue is carried in with a creak sounding. Her mother notes her return while Claire asks about the expensive bronze statue they just purchased. Looking at her mother's new jewelry, Claire questions how they can spend while buried in debt.
Jacob claims a mysterious benefactor has lent them more money than they will ever truly need.
Claire reacts with a confused and fearful expression, unable to comprehend their sudden change in fortune.
Her father pulls her into a sudden hug, feigning a fatherly concern for her struggle.
He whispers that things have been hard for her, while Claire looks on with trembling eyes.
Jacob reaches out with a reach sounding, hiding a sinister, dark grin as he plans her end.
A heavy door opens with a creak sounding as a man in purple declares her struggle over.
With a sudden push sounding, Jacob shoves his daughter toward the stranger who has been waiting.
Claire stares in horror as she realizes the identity of the man her father has summoned.
The stranger reveals himself with a cruel smile, surrounded by the ominous red of spider lilies.
Remembering his previous interest, Claire feels a tense squeeze sounding as she realizes she was sold.
In the quiet dark, Claire wonders how long she has been held captive without any food.
Claire narrates that Alphys is a terrifying man as he stands before a blood-stained background. Locked away and in pain, Claire's chains rattle with a sudden, loud crash sounding in the dark. Entering the room, the purple-clad man observes that Claire looks incredibly pale and weak tonight. Holding a bowl of red liquid, he mocks her state while questioning if she can even eat.
Desperate for sustenance, Claire lunges toward the bowl with a sudden, hungry jump sounding to slurp it.
She coughs violently with a wet crash sounding while the man watches her struggle with a smirk.
He admires her resilience with a sinister grin, hoping she survives his latest dose of strong poison.
Anefia arrives with a sharp clack sounding, complaining about the smell while hoping this poison finally kills her.
Adorned in red, the blonde sister cruelly asks Claire how it feels to suffer such intense pain. With a mocking giggle, Anefia notes that the man's toys usually perish in less than 10 days.
Trapped in chains, Claire gasps for air with a heavy huff sounding while questioning her sister's cruelty.
Anefia embraces the man, telling her sister to ponder the reason why while she continues to struggle. The sinister pair stands together over the collapsed and broken young woman in the dim red light.
Filled with a burning rage, Claire vows to definitely kill them both for their heartless, physical betrayal. Her hand reaches out through shattered memories as she screams that they will die by her hands.
In a final moment of clarity, her eyes snaps open with a quick, sharp click sounding of realization.
Claire reflects on her past obedience, wondering why she ever listened to her father and her sister.
Falling through her memories, she sees her bird in Marie, questioning the morality of her past choices. Reaching toward a blinding light, she desperately wishes for a chance to redo her entire life again. Her eyes flutter open with a soft, quick pachee sounding as she hears Marie calling her mem.
Waking in her childhood bed, the young lady looks around at her bright, floral-patterned room in confusion.
Confused by her surroundings, she asks Marie why she is there, shocking the loyal young maid.
Marie cheekily notes that waking her mistress is part of her job with a soft rustle sounding.
Still dazed, Claire reaches out and asks Marie to bring her a mirror to confirm her suspicions.
Looking at her younger reflection, Claire realizes she has successfully returned to the past before her ruin. Overwhelmed by the sudden reality of her second chance, the young lady begins to weep with relief.
Marie rushes to her mistress with a worried shout, asking if she is hurt or in pain.
The maid pulls her into a comforting hug, promising that she is there to protect her lady.
In the background, her pet bird chirps happily in its cage while the two women remain embraced.
Marie watches her mistress closely, noticing the sudden and intense change in the young lady's quiet demeanor. Claire stares with a new, fierce determination, swearing she will never let her sister have her way.
3 months later, a composed Claire sits by a sunlit window quietly reading a large leather-bound book. Enefia enters with a mocking puffed sounding, noting that her sister is still as gloomy as ever. Ignoring the insult, Claire continues her reading with a sharp, dismissive turn sounding of a paper page. Enefia demands respect for her visit, but Claire coldly asks what business her sister has with her. Taken aback by the uncharacteristic defiance, the blonde sister stares at Claire with a look of disbelief.
Enefia demands that Claire lend her the valuable necklace she recently received from their paternal side grandmother. Looking up from her book, Claire reflects on the request with a quiet and knowing internal sigh. She remembers her grandmother fondly as a pioneer who became the first female knight in their country.
She recalls how her father and sister both despised the strong-willed woman for her independent warrior spirit.
Young Claire remembers the warmth of her grandmother's hand and the deep love they shared long ago. Returning to the present, she looks at the book again, deciding how to handle her sister's greed. Enefia steps forward with an arrogant step, calling Claire slow-witted for not answering her immediately.
As Enefia heads for the jewelry box, Claire remembers the physical abuse she suffered in her past.
Enefia reaches for the box with a clack sounding, but Claire's hand moves with a sudden reach. Moving with a sudden grab sounding, Claire seizes her sister's throat, making Enefia tremble in sudden terror. Staring into her sister's wide eyes, Claire whispers that she will never be a toy again.
Tightening her grip, Claire declares she will no longer tolerate Enefia's selfishness or her physical violence. While Enefia gasps for air, Claire coldly tells her to leave the room quietly or face consequences.
Terrified and gasping, Enefia pleads for Claire to let her go as she agrees to leave immediately.
With a sudden thud sounding, Claire releases Enefia, who slips to the floor screaming in shock.
Enefia coughs violently with a sudden hic sounding as she gasps for breath in wide-eyed terror. Scrambling away, the blonde sister shouts a final, bitter threat to remember this defiant brat's actions. Claire stands silently as her sister flees, hearing the receding, rhythmic clatter sounding of high heels. Looking toward the window, Claire thinks it was dangerous and decides not to recklessly kill her that. A dark smirk sounding crosses her face while she reflects on all the intense suffering she previously endured.
Claire recalls Sarah Estrella, her grandmother, wielding a training sword with a powerful, sudden swing sounding. Moving with a quick dash sounding, young Claire runs through the garden flowers to greet her grandmother. Startled by the sudden approach, Sarah asks if something is wrong or if an incident occurred. Hugging her tightly, young Claire says she missed her despite seeing her only the night before. The former knight gently strokes the girl's hair while the surrounding floral garden remains peaceful and bright. Looking up with a serious expression, young Claire calls out to her grandmother to ask a question. Fidgeting with her dress, the young girl hesitantly asks if her grandfather would grant her a favor.
Claire stares with a new and unwavering intensity, looking nothing like the fragile child she once was.
Surprised, the older woman asks why the change is so sudden when Claire previously feared swords.
Claire explains her recent realization that without true power, she will inevitably lose everything she holds dear. The grandmother narrows her eyes, sensing the hidden weight behind the young lady's uncharacteristic and somber words. Shaking with a soft rustle sounding, Claire admits her hatred for fighting while acknowledging her past mistakes. She declares with a firm voice that without fighting, she can never truly protect her own life. A glimmer of pride appears in the older woman's eyes as she watches her determined granddaughter. The two stand together in the sunlit garden while the grandmother considers the girl's sudden, desperate request. Grinning with a sudden flash sounding, Sarah agrees to teach her, but warns she won't be easy.
Overjoyed by the acceptance, young Claire beams and promises to work as hard as she possibly can.
The scene shifts to rigorous training as the grandmother forces Claire to hold her sword stance correctly.
Time passes as Claire runs endless laps through the mansion gardens while being timed by her mentor.
Drenched in sweat, the young lady gasps for air but refuses to give up on her training. Claire executes a heavy vertical swing with a loud swoosh sounding while her grandmother watches from behind.
Sarah observes her progress with crossed arms, noting the girl's dedication to mastering the ways of combat.
A sudden, sharp realization strikes the grandmother as she watches Claire, sensing a looming and dark shadow. Sarah collapses with a wet cough sounding while a panicked Claire screams out to her fallen grandmother. Rushing to her side, Claire desperately shouts that she will go and fetch the doctor immediately. Wobbling with a faint step sounding, the elderly woman refuses help and demands Claire continue her practice. Later in a quiet room, the bedridden grandmother tells Claire that sad faces do not suit her. While the woman coughs violently again, Claire realizes she couldn't stop her from falling ill despite her efforts. Shedding a tear with a soft sob sounding, Claire feels helpless even with her knowledge of the future.
Brushing away a tear with a soft brush sounding, Sarah notes Claire's strength and tells her not to cry. She whispers a final promise that she will never leave the young lady alone in this house. The grandmother gives a gentle and peaceful smile, looking upon Claire with a deep and enduring love. The promise lingers in the air while a background of golden flowers blooms in the soft white. Claire is snapped out of her memories by a sudden, questioning look as she touches her face. A maid enters the room to announce that the mistress has an unexpected and high-ranking visitor. A man in a dark uniform enters with a heavy, rhythmic step sounding into the brightly lit room. Shocked by the visitor, Claire's chair falls with a heavy thud sounding while she gasps in total disbelief. Staring in awe, Claire recognizes Lord Edgar as he stands surrounded by an aura of blue roses. Trembling with a sudden realization, she asks the black-haired nobleman why he has come to their home. Edgar looks at her with a curious gaze, asking if they have somehow encountered one another before. Claire gasps internally as she realizes that they have not actually met yet in this current life. Panic-stricken by her slip-up, the young lady worries about how to explain her sudden recognition of him. Standing tall and stoic, Edgar remains a powerful figure whose presence commands the attention of the room. Claire notes that although he is younger now, his overwhelming atmosphere is exactly as she remembered before. Claire recalls her past with Lord Edgar, noting his unexpected kindness during their one conversation. Claire is snapped out of her internal thoughts when her grandmother asks if she is listening. Turning toward the bed with a sudden turn sounding, Claire asks her grandmother what is wrong. Sarah offers to postpone their discussion if Claire feels too uncomfortable to continue the talk now. Moving with a quick dash sounding, Claire insists on hearing the truth while Edgar watches her. Lord Edgar enters the room and stands beside Claire as they approach the bedridden former knight. Walking with a heavy step sounding, the nobleman politely requests permission to speak with the lady. The black-haired man formally introduces himself as Edgar Townsend to the respected and legendary Madame Sarah. Claire reflects on Edgar's lineage, noting his family's prestige and his role in the Knight Order. She recalls the history between their families, specifically the strong friendship between Sarah and Commander Albert. Claire remembers that in her previous life, her sister Anefia had almost successfully married Lord Edgar. Performing a polite curtsy, the young lady introduces herself to the visitor as Claire Estrella. Looking at the stoic man, Claire recalls he was once gravely injured in a past war. Sarah mocks the young man, questioning why his family would send a mere brat as their representative. Startled by the insult, Claire scolds her grandmother while Edgar approaches with a faint step sounding. Surrounded by an aura of blue roses, Edgar calmly accepts the criticism and proposes starting their business. Edgar explains he was sent to instruct Sarah's grandchild, leaving the young lady in total shock. Claire gasps in sudden realization that she is the one who will be training under him. Smiling with a soft grin sounding, Sarah confirms that Claire is indeed the grandchild Albert mentioned. Turning with a sharp turn sounding, Edgar looks at Claire with disbelief, questioning if she is his student. Flustered and blushing, Claire cries out in confusion at her grandmother's unexpected and sudden arrangement. Sometime later, Claire and Edgar stand in the garden dressed in combat gear with training swords. While a worried Marie watches from afar, Edgar admits his surprise at Claire's identity as his pupil. Drawing his blade, Edgar warns he will refuse the request if she lacks the necessary talent. Sarah encourages the man to test her granddaughter, while Claire prepares herself for the challenge. Gripping her sword with a firm clench sounding, Claire realizes that Edgar will not hold back. Marie shouts for her mistress to stop, but Claire tells the worried maid she is fine.
Marie refuses to leave, determined to protect her lady if the training session goes wrong.
Stealing her resolve, Claire admits that charging recklessly will surely lead to her immediate defeat. Edgar challenges her to attack, while Claire moves forward with a sudden, high-speed dash sounding. Their training swords collide with a sharp and echoing clash sounding in the quiet evening air. Claire pushes herself to the limit, exchanging strikes with the skilled knight during their intense duel.
Staring at her opponent, the young lady concludes that force alone will never defeat a master.
Determining her next move, Claire considers an alternative strategy as the sun begins to set. Pushing off the ground with a sudden jump sounding, Claire launches herself high into the air. Edgar parries her attack, noting that the young lady's combat stance is actually quite impressive.
Moving with lightning speed, the black-haired knight counters her strike and drives Claire backward.
Clashing blades again, Edgar tells her that a good stance is not enough to become a knight. The man swings his sword with a powerful motion, forcing Claire to defend herself desperately. Looking into the reflection on the blade, Claire sees the point of Edgar's sword aimed at her. Edgar acknowledges her potential, noting with a calm voice that she possesses the eyes of a warrior. Breathing heavily with a repeated huff sounding, Claire realizes her physical stamina is rapidly reaching its limit. Glancing toward her opponent with a sharp look sounding, Claire tells herself to hold on just longer.
Amidst the clatter of swords, Marie watches as her mistress continues the fierce and exhausting battle. Drenched in sweat, Claire continues to huff as she prepares for one final, desperate move.
Edgar declares the duel is over while Claire focuses her energy for a final, decisive moment.
Launching forward with a sudden jump sounding, Claire attacks Edgar with everything she has left. Blinding light fills the scene while Edgar gasps in shock at his student's unexpected and bold maneuver. With a loud clank sounding, Claire delivers a powerful strike that catches the skilled knight off guard. Gasping for breath with a tired huff sounding, an exhausted Claire remains standing after the clash. The black-haired man looks at her with wide eyes and a bead of sweat running down.
Releasing a soft clack sounding, Edgar sheathes his training sword after their intense practice session together.
Edgar calls an end to the session while an exhausted Claire looks down at her training sword.
Edgar asks if her strategy involved using the setting sun to distract his vision during their combat.
Claire explains the low hedges provide a clear sunset view, letting her endure until the right moment.
Noticing her somber expression, the black-haired knight asks the young lady what is currently troubling her.
Claire looks at him and asks if a knight should always fight fair and square.
Edgar bursts into laughter while surrounded by a background of many blooming yellow and white flowers. The two walk together through the garden, sharing a much lighter and more relaxed training atmosphere. Peering through the window, a hand with red nails watches them and questions what she sees. Enefia glares with hatred, calling Claire a total eyesore and swearing to deal with her. Edgar acknowledges her talent, noting that Sarah's assessment of her granddaughter's potential was indeed correct. A close-up reveals Claire's golden eyes staring with a sudden and intense focus at her surroundings.
Edgar notices her unwavering gaze and asks if there is something unusual on his face.
Claire reflects privately that he is actually much easier to talk to than she had originally expected.
The young lady gasps in shock as a sudden and heavy thought crosses her mind. Edgar notes her initial familiarity, but Claire quickly lies and says she only heard some rumors. Releasing a tired sigh sounding, Edgar mentions that most noble ladies are usually terrified of him. Moving with a quick step sounding, Claire firmly denies his claim and defends her own perspective. Enethia appears in the garden and asks if the nobleman is one of Claire's many acquaintances. Offering a sweet smile, the blonde lady introduces herself to Edgar as Claire's older sister, Enefia.
Claire recalls Enefia's past hatred for Edgar, confused by her sister's sudden change in behavior. Bowing politely, the black-haired man formally introduces himself to the new arrival as Edgar Townsend.
Walking with a rhythmic step sounding, Enefia approaches him while mentioning the prestige of his family.
Enethia trips with a sudden slip sounding, but Edgar catches her before she hits the ground. Holding her securely, Edgar asks the blonde young lady if she is all right after her fall.
Claire watches them closely, thinking that the two of them look like a truly perfect match.
While Enefia clings to him, Claire concludes they only look perfect together from an outside perspective.
Edgar pushes her away and suggests she should avoid wearing high heels while walking in gardens.
Shocked and embarrassed by his bluntness, Enefia's face turns red as she blushes in total silence.
Edgar bids them farewell, stating he will report today's events to his superiors within the order.
Enefia fumes while Claire bows and thanks Edgar for the lesson as he walks away.
Later that night, a loud crash echoes through the house as someone screams in disbelief.
At dinner, a furious Enefia rants about his rudeness with a loud clank sounding of silverware. Turning toward Claire with a questioning look sounding, the father asks the identity of the man.
Claire names him Lord Edgar, causing the father to hit the table with a loud bang sounding.
Releasing a soft ahem sounding, the father asks why a duke's son visited without any announcement.
Claire explains he visited on behalf of the Knight Order to speak with their bedridden grandmother. Enefia suggests she should meet with him again, her eyes glowing with a sudden, greedy ambition.
The young lady looks at the couple with a look of desire as flowers bloom.
The mother thinks it is a wonderful idea since Enefia is at the proper marriageable age.
The mother tells the father to discuss this potential arrangement with his mother-in-law very soon.
Claire listens while thinking that a marriage between a baron's daughter and a duke's son is impossible. Claire recalls that in the past, Edgar's family met a horrific end following a terrible accident. Claire realizes that without that tragic accident, the absurd marriage arrangement would have never happened.
Pushing back her chair with a loud bang sounding, Claire reacts to her grim and sudden realization.
Glaring at her daughter, the mother scolds Claire for her sudden lack of manners and behavior. Moving with a fast dash sounding, Claire excuses herself by claiming she has suddenly fallen ill.
Releasing a soft sigh sounding, Enefia watches her sister leave the room while wondering what happened.
Claire runs through the dark corridors, concluding that she must become stronger to change the future. Claire realizes that her own personal efforts alone are insufficient to alter her looming destiny.
Recalling her training, Claire admits she cannot match the physical strength of a male opponent. The young lady considers that even a strong fighter would struggle against superior numbers.
Looking at the moon, Claire vows to change fate itself and survive her current life. At the castle, Commander Tryon praises Edgar for completing his recent mission with the Estrella family.
Tryon asks about Sarah's health, wishing he could visit if he weren't confined by duties.
Releasing a tired sigh sounding, Tryon complains that the older nobility continues to pressure for war. Surrounded by a gloom effect, a silent Edgar is scolded for his unnecessarily pessimistic attitude. Tryon notes that the current political situation would be much simpler if Sarah were still active. Edgar questions whether the elderly woman truly was such a legendary and formidable knight. Releasing a dismissive humph sounding, Tryon scolds the young knight for underestimating a woman's martial skill. The commander tells Edgar it is a shame he never witnessed Sarah's incredible combat abilities firsthand. Recalling Claire's performance, Edgar admits his views on female knights have changed since their recent duel. Tryon reacts with interest to Edgar's sudden shift in opinion regarding the young lady's talent. The commander asks if Edgar is specifically referring to Sarah's granddaughter, Claire Estrella. Tryon thinks privately that the girl does not seem particularly capable of becoming a knight. Edgar surprises everyone by stating that Claire possesses significant potential despite her current lack of experience. The red-haired knight reacts with confusion, questioning Edgar's uncharacteristic praise for the young noblewoman. Tryon explains that the order is currently unable to send an official instructor during this emergency.
Edgar remains silent, his face showing a hint of sweat as he listens to the commander.
Considering Edgar's rare endorsement, Tryon decides it would be wasteful to ignore Claire's potential. With a subtle smirk sounding, Tryon declares that women can be just as valuable as men. Rain falls on a carriage outside the estate with a steady pitter-patter sounding.
Voices inside the house shout in confusion at the sudden and unexpected news.
Claire's father asks Lord Edgar to repeat the shocking message he has just delivered.
Edgar formally repeats that he is delivering an official order from the Knight Commander.
Claire gasps as a crash sounding echoes when she hears she is summoned to the knight's quarters. Grabbing her with a firm grab sounding, the father demands to know what she did wrong. Edgar tells the man to calm down, explaining the order only wishes to ask her questions.
Edgar informs Claire that she has the legal right to refuse this particular formal summons. Surrounded by blue roses, Edgar clarifies that the order does not wish to restrict her choices. Claire is baffled, realizing that this event never occurred in her previous timeline of memories.
The young lady wonders what Lord Albert could possibly want with her at such a time. Panicking, the father insists that Claire is a minor and must have made some terrible mistake. Edgar refuses to share details but warns the father that Claire will be away for a while. Edgar questions the father's claim about her age, noting that the girl is already 15.
Edgar asks why she hasn't had a debutante ball yet, leaving the father flustered and speechless. Claire reflects that her parents spent her ball money on Anifia and delayed her own debut.
Staring intensely, Claire realizes that this unexpected invitation could be her best chance to change fate. Moving his arm with a sharp swish sounding, the father threatens to disown Claire if she goes. Turning with a sudden clack sounding, Claire's attention is drawn to the entrance of the room. Sarah enters the room with a rhythmic step sounding, leaning heavily on her wooden walking cane.
Sarah ignores Marie's pleas to rest and begins to lift her cane toward her granddaughter.
The cane strikes the carpeted floor with a heavy thud sounding, silencing the entire room. Sarah points her cane directly at Claire as she prepares to speak to the gathered group. The grandmother shouts for Claire to stop sulking and finally go seek some changes for herself. Sarah begins to wobble, causing Marie to shout in alarm while catching her before she falls. Claire watches from a distance as her grandmother is assisted back up the grand staircase. Closing her eyes, Claire officially agrees to the commander's summons amidst a backdrop of blooming flowers. The father is struck with disbelief, asking Claire if she truly doesn't mind being disowned. Bowing deeply, Claire thanks her father for everything and declares her intention to live independently. Slumping to the floor with a sudden slump sounding, the father mutters in complete disbelief. Turning with a quick turn sounding, Claire eagerly prepares to pack her things as Edgar instructs. Moving with a rhythmic step sounding, Claire rushes to find her grandmother before she leaves. Sarah offers a gentle smile, clearly proud of her granddaughter's decision to seek her own path.
Sarah reflects that Lord Albert is a dependable man who will ensure Claire is treated well. Placing a hand on her shoulder, Sarah accepts Claire's sincere gratitude for her unwavering support.
Sarah directs Marie to bring something important while the maid responds with a quick nod sounding. Stepping forward with a rhythmic step sounding, Marie carries a large, heavy black suitcase into the room.
Marie explains that she had already packed the young lady's belongings on their grandmother's orders.
Squeezing the handle with a firm squeeze sounding, Marie admits she is saddened by the sudden departure. Surrounded by flowers, Claire reassures the maid and asks her to look after her sister. Lunging forward with a sudden grab sounding, Marie tearfully hugs her lady while crying in distress.
Sarah reassures Claire that she will always be her granddaughter despite her father's harsh threats.
Resting her head on the maid's shoulder, a single tear falls from Claire's closed eye. Reaching down, Claire picks up her heavy suitcase with a quick and sudden lift sounding. Moving with a rhythmic step sounding, Claire carries her luggage down the grand, ornate staircase. From the landing, Sarah and Marie watch silently as the young lady walks away into her future.
Walking with a rhythmic step sounding, Claire makes her way through the empty, silent hallway.
Anifia stops her with a sudden freeze sounding, mentioning she heard Claire is finally leaving. Smiling maliciously, the blonde sister expresses her joy and thanks Claire for leaving her sight. Anifia mocks her, claiming she is a sinner who should never show her face again.
Fuming with rage, Anifia screams in anger as the background turns into a jagged red pattern.
Reaching out with a creak sounding, Anifia calls her a criminal and moves to grab her.
Edgar opens the door and asks if she is finished packing, interrupting the sisters' confrontation.
Gasps of surprise echo through the hall as the sisters react to the knight's sudden appearance. Looking flustered, Claire confirms she is ready to go while flowers bloom in the background. Reaching out with a quick snatch sounding, Edgar takes the heavy suitcase from Claire's hands. Edgar closes the door with a loud clack sounding, telling her she won't need an umbrella.
Claire wipes a stray tear from her cheek, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief.
Under a bright, clear sky, Claire follows the knight toward the carriage waiting outside the estate. Pausing for a moment, Claire looks back at Sarah and Marie, who wave from the balcony. Turning back with a soft smile, Claire's face is framed by a background of blooming flowers. The carriage travels down a wooded road with a steady clop-clop sounding from the horses. Sitting across from Edgar, Claire glances out the window as they leave her old life behind. Edgar offers a sincere apology for the sudden and rushed nature of their departure today. Claire feels she should apologize instead for the unsightly scene he witnessed at her home. Turning toward her with a quick turn sounding, Edgar admits his presence made her look arrested. A silence falls between them as Edgar stares thoughtfully out of the moving carriage's window. Claire wonders privately if the knight feels pity for her or if he is actually offended. Claire reassures him, explaining that she had already intended to leave her family's house eventually. Edgar brings up the debutante ball, but Claire shakes her head to dismiss the father's claims. As the carriage moves with a loud clatter sounding, Claire reflects that she didn't belong there. Edgar mentions he heard she was seeking an instructor to teach her the art of swordsmanship. Recalling her past training, Claire admits her defeat while Edgar praises her impressive 2-year progress. Beaming with joy, Claire begins to express her deep gratitude for his unexpected and kind compliment. Edgar looks at her with a calm expression, his gaze lingering on her happy face. Releasing a soft ahem sounding, Edgar guarantees the knight's order will protect her from now on. Claire remains confused, wondering why Lord Albert would specifically want to summon her at all. Edgar admits he lacks information but reassures her that the commander will treat her fairly. Claire sits quietly in the carriage as it moves with a steady clatter sounding. Claire reflects on her secret reasons for accepting the summons against her father's wishes. Claire plans to prevent Edgar's forced marriage and the tragic deaths within his family. Growing restless around her sister, Claire notes that Anifia is currently just a spoiled girl. Claire observes that her blonde sister's behavior is currently nothing more than childish selfishness. Claire realizes that Anifia is not yet cunning enough to attempt a murder plot. Reflecting on 3 years of observation, Claire remembers being ignored while Anifia received everything. An ominous vision of blood reminds Claire she has only 4 years left to live. Claire resolves to find out what turns her sister into a monster and stop her. Determined to change fate, Claire recalls the name of the future murderer, Alphys Grisner. Claire sits amidst roses, realizing she cannot achieve her goals without her debutante ball. Sitting across from Edgar, Claire decides this summons is her best path forward right now. The carriage pulls up to the grand estate with a rhythmic rattle sounding.
Claire gasps in surprise as Edgar announces their arrival at the imposing Knight's Order headquarters.
Edgar steps out of the carriage first, his boots making a quick tap sounding. Claire accepts Edgar's hand with a nervous nod as she prepares to exit the carriage. Stepping into the courtyard, the wind catches Claire's hair with a gentle swoosh sounding. Edgar leads the way toward the massive building while Claire follows with an awestruck expression. Holding Edgar's hand, Claire wonders what kind of future awaits her at this destination. Glancing around the ornate hallway, Claire tries to suppress her anxiety while following the knight. The heavy office door opens with a slow and low creak sounding. Inside the office, Commander Tryon welcomes them, while the red-haired vice captain watches silently. Staring intensely, the commander formally acknowledges Claire as the legendary Madame Sarah's granddaughter. Claire bows deeply as Tryon offers a sincere apology for the sudden summons. Shifting in his seat with a soft rustle sounding, Tryon regrets not meeting her sooner. Tryon explains that his duties prevented him from personally escorting her to the headquarters today. Claire observes that although the commander looks stern, he seems surprisingly reasonable and fair. Claire recalls a memory of Tryon suffering from war injuries during her previous life's events. Standing tall, Claire maintains a stern expression while declaring her duty to obey the order. Clearing his throat with a quick cough sounding, Tryon prepares to discuss the official business. Claire lets out a nervous gulp sounding when Tryon reveals that this meeting is top secret. Tryon mentions he is aware of the intense training Claire has received from her grandmother. Surprised, Claire turns with a sudden turn sounding toward Edgar, realizing he shared her secrets. Claire feels incredibly flustered and quickly admits that she lost her recent duel against Edgar. Letting out a hearty ha-ha sounding, Tryon tells her not to compare herself to Edgar. Tryon notes that if Edgar were the standard, most knights would be considered mere novices. The commander explains that Claire currently lacks the credibility required for immediate admission. Claire realizes she still hasn't shared her own personal reasons for wanting to be there. Tryon reacts with a shocked shout, clearly taken aback by the young lady's unexpected statement. Claire clarifies to the gathered knights that she learned swordsmanship purely for her own safety.
Leaning in with a sudden zoom sounding, the red-haired knight expresses surprise at her motivation.
Realizing he overstepped, the red-haired knight retreats with a quick step and apologizes.
Surrounded by roses, the red-haired man introduces himself as Vice Captain Conrad Archibald.
Claire admits she lacks the qualities of a knight after Conrad mentions her rumored ambitions. Moving forward with a sudden zoom sounding, Edgar insists that Claire possesses immense martial potential.
Interrupting with a dry cough sounding, Tryon tells both knights to settle down immediately.
A tense silence fills the room as the three men look toward the young lady. Tryon informs Claire that she must fulfill a specific request from the order in exchange. Claire looks uncertain, wondering what kind of task the knight commander will ask of her. The grand palace stands silhouetted against the twilight sky, its windows glowing with warm light.
Accompanied by a loud creak sounding, the stern maid opens the door to a dim room. The stern maid informs the nervous Claire that this will be her new living quarters.
Claire recalls the commander's earlier order to infiltrate the castle disguised as a lowly maid.
Claire adjusts her bow as she prepares for her new, dangerous undercover mission.
The stern maid repeats that this sparse room with 2 beds is her new home.
With a quick glance sounding, Claire explores the room while learning she will have a roommate. A sudden, loud creak sounding makes Claire turn toward the door in anticipation of her roommate.
A beautiful black-haired maid enters with a rhythmic clack sounding, complaining about being exhausted.
With a loud yawn sounding, the new maid stretches while the others watch her arrival.
The stern maid scolds Joanna, reminding her that she was expected back earlier for the newcomer. Joanna dismisses the scolding, claiming she had trouble finishing an order from a certain person.
Letting out a playful bleh sounding, Joanna mocks the stern supervisor who shouts her name.
The black-haired maid turns toward Claire with a sudden and sharp turn sounding. Moving with a sudden zoom sounding, Joanna gets uncomfortably close to the startled Claire.
Joanna leans in close, noting that Claire still carries the scent of expensive, high-quality soap. The supervisor stops the teasing, explaining that Claire came to work from a proper background. The stern maid formally announces that the 2 young women are now officially roommates. Releasing a weary sigh sounding, the supervisor instructs the 2 of them to try getting along.
With a loud bam sounding, the supervisor leaves Claire alone to get details from Joanna. As Joanna stares with a steady stare sounding, Claire worries about the castle's surprisingly lax atmosphere.
With a sudden flinch sounding, Claire reacts when Joanna asks if she expected more strictness. Joanna laughs with a bright aha sounding, confirming the atmosphere is exactly as it appears. Using a quick point sounding, Joanna indicates which bed Claire is allowed to use.
Joanna explains the rules regarding personal responsibility for uniforms, luggage, and maintaining cleanliness.
With a soft flop sounding, Joanna goes to sleep while Claire wonders about her duties. Rolling over with a slow roll sounding, Joanna comments on Claire's overly diligent and worried nature.
Joanna warns the flustered Claire that her current stiff attitude won't last long in this environment.
Claire feels completely overwhelmed by the situation, wondering how her plan led to this outcome.
The scene shifts to explain the events that occurred just a few hours ago. In the commander's office, Claire asks if they want her to find war supporters undercover. Tryon confirms while Conrad explains the internal divide regarding the neighboring kingdom of Aleft. With a quick shake sounding, Claire admits she is unaware of the recent Sowell incident. Conrad explains the incident involved a merchant trying to cross the border into the Vol kingdom. Conrad details how an inspection revealed a massive quantity of banned drugs in the merchant's cart. What seemed like simple smuggling became serious when an illegal drug called Gushin was discovered.
With a quick shake sounding, Claire listens as the dark-haired knight asks if she recognizes Gusheng.
Claire's hands shake with a sudden tremble sounding as Conrad prepares to explain the drug's effects. A dry cough sounding interrupts the tension as the group discusses the severity of the situation.
Tryon signals to continue, and Conrad explains the drug is a truth serum causing hallucinations.
Conrad notes the drug allows for manipulation, adding that Sowell was interrogated thoroughly about its destination.
With a harsh grit sounding, Tryon reacts when told the merchant claimed the drugs were his order.
The dark-haired knight clarifies for Claire that the commander never gave such a criminal order.
With a heavy flop sounding, Tryon sits down, frustrated that Aleft refuses to believe his denial. Tryon laments being so busy with strategy meetings that he hasn't been home in a month. Tryon expresses his deep concern that these false accusations might actually trigger a full-scale war. Claire is chilled by the realization that this specific incident was the trigger for the future war.
Conrad explains that usually an unreliable merchant's claims wouldn't be enough to cause such trouble. Conrad points out that Soul possessed a passport verified by a member of their own nobility. Conrad notes that the passport made people believe the testimony before Claire asks about the noble.
Claire is horrified to learn that the noble was found dead from an apparent hanging.
Conrad Archibald explains that people are working behind the scenes to trigger a war.
Commander Tryon tells Claire that he wants her to investigate who is behind this mess.
Tryon explains it would be suspicious sending a knight, but someone like Claire is perfect.
Claire contemplates the mission while resting her chin thoughtfully on her hand.
The commander mentions that he heard about Claire's impressive skills and bravery from Edgar.
Edgar gazes softly at Claire as blue flower petals drift through the air. With a quick nod sounding, Edgar acknowledges his faith in the young lady's skill.
Conrad winks and promises a suitable reward if everything goes smoothly with her mission. Claire considers that although troublesome, having Tryon owe her a favor could stop the war. Conrad points out Claire's quick understanding of the situation while she reacts with confusion. Placing her hand over her heart, Claire formally declares that she accepts the secret request.
Brilliant sunlight floods the grand pillared hall as the palace morning officially begins.
Maids in blue and white uniforms stand in 2 rows for the morning assembly. Claire introduces herself to the group, expressing hope that they can all get along well. Joanna lets out a loud yawn, sounding, looking completely bored during the newcomer's introduction. Claire wonders how Joanna can be so sleepy after getting plenty of rest.
Claire recalls how Joanna's loud snoring made it impossible to sleep last night.
In a flashback, a kind maid informs the sleeping Claire that it is assembly time. Claire turns to find the brown-haired maid staring at her with friendly interest. With a soft chuckle sounding, the green-eyed maid makes a pleasant first impression. With a sudden turn sounding, Claire watches Joanna snore with a large snot bubble. Claire feels that the road ahead as a palace maid looks incredibly tough. With a rhythmic clack sounding, 3 maids walk down the long, pillared palace corridor. One of the maids asks Claire if she is already finding her first day difficult. Narration reveals that the kind neighbor who approached the newcomer is named Paula.
Paula giggles at the situation while the black-haired Joanna lets out another tired yawn.
Letting out a weary sigh sounding, Claire admits she is grateful for Paula's morning help.
Paula tells Claire that the head maid's trickery is actually a quite common occurrence.
Paula explains the head maid is strict and will scold anyone who fails their task. Paula suggests the head maid likely omitted the assembly time specifically to trick the newcomer. The brown-haired maid notes the head maid is likely disappointed that Claire wasn't actually late. Claire feels that the supervisor isn't just strict, but is actually quite unreasonable. Paula mentions that even the head maid has completely lost hope when it comes to Joanna.
Paula waves as she explains they must separate here to handle their different assigned jobs.
With a sudden dash sounding, Joanna speeds ahead, leaving Claire surprised by her energy. With a rhythmic clack sounding, Claire follows the black-haired maid down the corridor. With a quick glance sounding, Claire watches the yawning Joanna, unable to read her thoughts. Claire continues to observe the strange black-haired maid as they walk in silence. With a sudden halt sounding, the 2 maids stop in front of the door. Joanna points toward the door and announces that they have been assigned here today. Claire looks surprised as Joanna gives her a long, steady, and intense stare. Claire reaches for the door handle, suggesting that they should start their chores quickly. With a sudden grab sounding, a hand firmly catches Claire's wrist to stop her. With a firm squeeze sounding, Joanna prevents Claire from opening the heavy door. With the sharp knock sounding, Joanna alerts the occupants of the room to their presence. Joanna knocks on the door again, her expression turning uncharacteristically serious and grim. With a loud thud sounding, crashes and stomping footsteps echo from behind the door. With a loud bang sounding, the heavy wooden door suddenly swings wide open. With a sudden dash sounding, several people flee the room, including a blonde man. A sudden ba-dump sounding fills Claire's chest as she recognizes a chillingly familiar scent.
Claire sits chained to a bed in a dark room, looking down with a defeated expression.
With a sudden gasp sounding, Claire coughs violently while clutching her chest in visible distress. The brown-haired man notes that she looks scared while looking down at her with golden eyes.
Walking toward her, the man expresses his desire to see more of her frightened face.
With a soft clink sounding, the man holds a glass bottle filled with a pink potion.
Claire watches with confusion as the man twists the bottle's cork open with a quick twist sounding.
With a sudden gasp sounding, Claire is forced to inhale the pink fumes the man blows. Claire lets out an audible groan as the strange pink smoke begins to fill her senses. Looking completely dazed, Claire's eyes lose focus while pink mist swirls around her head. Leaning in close, the man notes the drug will work while claiming he has developed tolerance. With a sudden tremble sounding, Claire collapses onto the bed while questioning what is happening. The man's voice declares this is only the beginning of their fun time together, addressing Claire. With a sudden clasp sounding, the man's gloved hand firmly catches Claire's chin to face him.
Letting out a dark smirk sounding, the man stares down at the dazed and incapacitated woman. In the present, Claire wonders what's wrong while her mind races with shock from the vision.
With a sudden gasp sounding, Claire nearly crashes into the back of the black-haired maid.
Joanna asks if her sudden stop was surprising, noting Claire instantly stopped moving during their walk. Joanna continues walking down the corridor, dismissing the behavior as a common occurrence within the castle.
Claire stands alone in the hallway, looking back with a bewildered and unsettled expression. Claire recalls a dark memory involving a man and a woman in a red dress.
Claire realizes she recognizes the scent of alphas, her eyes sharpening with a sudden realization. Joanna looks back over her shoulder at the newcomer, who is still lost in her thoughts. Entering a room, Joanna explains that she doesn't care about the cleaning procedure for a spare room.
Claire objects to her behavior, prompting Joanna to toss the broom and demand help with her work.
Claire is left speechless when Joanna blames her for not being able to get enough sleep. Joanna turns her back on the work, claiming she is heading off to find a nap.
With a lazy wave sounding, Joanna departs while the flustered Claire tries to stop her.
Claire reaches for the closed door, calling out for the lazy black-haired maid to wait. Looking downward, Claire realizes the road ahead as a maid is much harder than she thought.
Claire decides she will just do the cleaning herself since she has no other choice. With a quick grab sounding, Claire takes hold of the broom handle with a determined grip.
With a firm squeeze sounding, Claire notes this task is nothing compared to her past hardships. Moving with a rhythmic wipe sounding, Claire gets on her knees to scrub the dusty floor. With a quick brush sounding, Claire dusts the furniture until the entire room begins to sparkle. Letting out a weary pew sounding, Claire wipes her forehead after completing the difficult cleaning task. The stern supervisor enters and asks what the meaning of this sudden and perfect transformation is. The head maid asks if someone helped, but Claire confirms she cleaned the room alone.
The supervisor glances around, shocked that Claire cleaned the dusty room by herself so quickly.
Letting out a soft sigh sounding, Claire recalls cleaning her family's house in her previous life. With a tired sigh sounding, the head maid decides the work is sufficient for today. Moving with a sudden zoom sounding, the supervisor warns Claire not to let Joanna bass her. The head maid grits her teeth, remembering the butler's recommendation for the troublesome black-haired maid. Claire wonders who Joanna truly is, while an image of the maid appears amidst floral patterns.
Letting out a dry cough sounding, the supervisor tells Claire to just leave the girl be.
The head maid tells Claire to send Joanna to her office for a firm reprimand soon. The stern supervisor stands tall, surveying the room with a focused and questioning gaze. Bright light reflects off the sparkling room while the head maid remains in silent disbelief. Turning with a quick glance sounding, the supervisor assumes there would be plenty of dust piling up. Letting out a weary sigh sounding, Claire reflects on her current situation while surrounded by roses.
Claire walks through the palace gardens while glancing around at the lush greenery and surroundings.
Letting out a weary pew sounding, Claire is relieved the head maid found no faults in her cleaning. Narration notes that in comparison to Joanna, the head maid's anger toward Claire is practically non-existent. Moving with a rustle sounding, Claire pushes through the thick bushes to explore the palace gardens.
Claire realizes she's lost in the garden maze while trying to take what she thought was a shortcut.
With a loud rumble sounding, Claire's stomach growls because she was too focused on cleaning to eat lunch. Claire reacts with a sudden gasp sounding as she notices a group of people in the garden ahead. Claire hopes that if it is a fellow servant, she can ask for directions to the cafeteria. Claire spots a noblewoman and a man in a secretive conversation further down the garden path. Claire identifies them as high-ranking nobles based on their intricate, expensive-looking attire alone. Claire stays hidden behind a bush, observing the two figures from a distance while remaining unnoticed. Recognition strikes as Claire realizes the man is Alphys, the merchant from her dark and haunting memories. With a sudden rustle sounding, Claire hides deeper as she wonders why Alphys is in this garden. Claire trembles with chills sounding as memories of Alpha's dark smirk and cruelty flood back to her. With a quick peek sounding, Claire continues to watch the secretive meeting unfold from her hiding spot. Claire struggles to hear the conversation as the noblewoman speaks with visible urgency and desperation. Moving with a sneak sounding, Claire follows the garden path to get a closer look at the meeting. The brown-haired man urges the lady to stay calm and refrain from making impossible demands of him. With a sudden yank sounding, the woman grabs Alphys's collar, demanding more of a substance called Gushin. With a rustle sounding, Claire wonders about the identity of the lady who is meeting with Alphys. Claire reacts with a sudden gasp as she is grabbed by an elderly woman in a maid's uniform. The elderly woman sternly warns Claire to forget everything she witnessed in the garden and keep quiet. The woman's intent. Back in her room, Claire ponders the lady's connection to Alphys while trying to relax for the night.
Claire recalls the noblewoman's desperate plea for the dangerous substance known as Gushin during the meeting.
Claire remembers that Alphys is a merchant who specializes in dealing with various illegal and dangerous drugs. With a sudden roll sounding, Claire wonders if Alphys was involved in the previous incident at the border. With a sudden creak sounding, the bedroom door opens, interrupting Claire's deep and troubled thoughts. With a sudden throw sounding, Joanna tosses her headband while blaming Claire for the headmaid's scolding. Joanna pouts while telling Claire she should have lied to protect her roommate from getting into trouble. Claire glares back, questioning why she should ever have to lie for someone so lazy and irresponsible. Claire tells Joanna that her own thoughtless actions are the actual cause of her current misery and scolding. A heavy silence sounding follows as Joanna stares at Claire with wide, shocked, and speechless eyes. Claire demands to know if the black-haired maid has anything else to say about the situation. With a sudden turn sounding, Joanna ignores the confrontation and goes back to her own bed. With a loud thump sounding, Joanna falls asleep instantly, leaving the frustrated Claire alone with her thoughts. Claire's vision blurs as she wonders why her body suddenly feels incredibly heavy and unresponsive. In a dark memory, a man's voice declares that her time has finally run out after her long endurance. With a sudden tremble sounding, Claire's hand shakes while she desperately tries to call for help from Anefia. With a soft puffed sounding, the man smiles while claiming he has no more use for the girl. With a quick wrestle sounding, the man pulls out a hidden dagger from his coat for his next move. With a sharp stab sounding, the man plunges his weapon into the chained and helpless victim. The man's voice declares his intention to complete the final touch of his dark plan. With a sudden cough sounding, Claire gasps for air while blood splatters against the dark floor. Darkness closes in as Claire feels that everything in her life is finally coming to an end. The image of the brown-haired man lingers as Claire's consciousness begins to fade away into the darkness. A final thought questions the presence of alphas as the vision of the garden meeting fades out. Moving with a huff sounding, Claire runs through a nightmare landscape filled with red and black shadows. With a sudden chills sounding, giant hands reach out from the shadows to grab the fleeing girl. Claire reaches upward into the darkness while a voice from the distance commands her to wake up. With a loud slap sounding, a voice commands Claire to wake up from her intense and terrifying nightmare. Claire's face is stained with tears as she experiences a deeply painful and emotional moment. Joanna tries to wake Claire while a shadow of alphas looms behind, calling out to her. Letting out a loud scream sounding, Claire thrashes wildly while the black-haired roommate tries to hold her. With a sudden grab sounding, Claire struggles against the hold and demands to be let go immediately. With a sudden flinch sounding, the silver-haired man tells Claire to calm down during her intense panic. Letting out a sudden gasp sounding, Claire's tear-filled eye widens as she begins to return to reality. The silver-haired man stares down with a sweating and deeply troubled expression amidst a floral background. The silver-haired man reacts with confusion and shock, questioning the identity of the person before him. Moving with a sudden jump sounding, the man leaps away from the bed as Claire wakes up. Letting out a heavy thump sounding, Claire realized it was a nightmare and tries to calm down. Moving with a quick brush sounding, the silver-haired man wipes his brow while looking flustered and tired. The silver-haired man heads toward the window while Claire desperately calls out for him to wait. Claire questions if the newcomer is actually Joanna and asks for the meaning of his behavior. The man notes her question is difficult while he picks up a dark-haired wig from the floor. Holding the wig, the silver-haired man explains the situation is exactly as it appears to be. Moving with a rhythmic brush sounding, the man explains he lied about his gender to work here. With a sudden swing sounding, the man holds a knife to Claire's throat, claiming he follows orders. The man's eye narrows while he warns that knowing his secret will cost Claire her life. Moving with a sudden turn sounding, he flips the knife and promises safety if she stays silent. Letting out a soft humph sounding, Claire suggests he change his attitude, which he finds quite amusing. With a sudden roll sounding, the two lie in silence while Claire continues to stare at her roommate. Claire looks away with a somber and thoughtful expression while surrounded by a beautiful floral pattern. Claire asks if his intervention was due to her nightmare, and he confirms his unexpected help. The man finds it weird that she is thanking her potential killer, but Claire remains firm. Letting out a weary sigh sounding, the silver-haired man closes his eyes to rest for the night. The man lies back on his pillow, suggesting they both avoid prying into each other's business. Letting out a loud yawn sounding, the man falls asleep while Claire sits quietly in her bed. Claire struggles under a laundry basket, realizing Joanna was hiding a massive amount of dirty work. With a mock bless sounding, the silver-haired man ignores Claire's warning about the headmaid's lecture. Claire reflects on the shock of Joanna being a man, but feels safe for the time. Letting out a tired sigh sounding, Claire carries the heavy basket while trying to avoid attracting attention. Claire walks down the hallway, wondering about the identity of the master who sent the man. Claire enters the busy laundry room where several other maids are occupied with their daily chores. Claire announces she has brought the laundry, catching the attention of a friendly older maid nearby. Moving with a sudden bow sounding, Claire introduces herself as the new maid while being warmly greeted. The elderly maid holds out a small folded piece of paper and asks Claire if she can read. Letting out a soft aha sounding, the maids admit their illiteracy and explain the paper's trouble. Moving with a quick flip sounding, Claire takes the paper and confirms that she understands the text.
Letting out a sudden gasp sounding, Claire is struck by a familiar scent emanating from the note.
Letting out a soft smile sounding, Claire claims it belongs to the head maid and offers delivery. The laundry maids are impressed by Claire's literacy, noting that modern maids possess very useful skills.
Letting out a soft, aha sounding, Claire laughs awkwardly while the other maids look on with admiration.
Letting out a rhythmic clack sounding, the hallway remains empty as the scene shifts back to her room.
Letting out a sudden bam sounding, Claire enters her bedroom and shuts the door to be alone.
With a quick glance sounding, Claire looks around the room to ensure her roommate is not present. Letting out a soft flop sounding, Claire sits on her bed and looks at the paper again.
Claire recalls the image of Alphys, confirming the familiar scent on the note belongs to him.
Moving with a quick rustle sounding, Claire unfolds the paper to reveal the secret text inside. The paper contains a list for a substance called Devil's Tonic, confirming her suspicions of activity.
Claire realizes Alphys is disguising dangerous drugs as tonics and selling them to nobles for profit. Claire realizes Alphys uses his merchant status as a cover to always carry dangerous drugs.
Back in her room, Claire deduces that Gushin refers to a great general of hell.
The name represents a demon known for manipulating and influencing the hearts of human beings.
Claire stares at the memo, noticing an important clue in the signature of Edgar Townsend.
A memory of a blue-haired man surfaces as Claire links the name to him.
Surrounded by floral patterns, Claire admits she never expected to become suspicious of the man.
A sudden clamor sounding fills the busy dining hall where the castle maids gather.
Claire's expression fills with a sudden gloom sounding as she reflects on her sleepless night.
A fellow maid notices Claire's dark mood and asks if she is feeling okay today.
Joanna claims Claire was rolling on her bed all night, making it impossible to sleep.
A sudden nom sounding follows as Joanna recalls Claire sleeping heavily despite her claims.
Letting out a soft aha sounding, Claire awkwardly laughs off the concern, claiming she is tired.
The sound of a sudden step sounding echoes through the hall as someone approaches.
A maid calls out to her friend Paula, asking if she has heard the news.
A sudden clamor sounding rises as a maid arrives with a tray to join them.
Paula asks for clarification on what news the green-eyed maid is referring to this morning.
The news reveals that a maid named Catherine has gone missing since the previous day. Claire is shocked to learn that Catherine, another castle maid, has suddenly disappeared. Catherine is described as a timid, nervous girl who was often overlooked by her peers. A sudden whisper sounding conveys a rumor that Catherine might have eloped with a man. The maids are shocked by the claim, but the green-eyed maid insists she is serious. Rumor says Catherine was seen hugging a well-dressed man, confirming suspicions of a secret romance. Paula notes that looks can be deceiving when it comes to such a quiet girl. She worries that the disappearance will leave them more understaffed than they already were. The group discusses how many maids have gone home or vanished, like Catherine lately. Claire exclaims in shock, suggesting that these disappearances might actually be cases of kidnapping. The other maids look on in silence, stunned by Claire's blunt and terrifying suggestion. One maid questions why anyone would kidnap commoners when there are many wealthy nobles nearby. She argues that the royal castle is the safest place and no crimes could occur. Claire notices Joanna watching her with a sudden glance sounding, noticing her intense and troubled reaction. Joanna thinks that the head maid will be held accountable if the situation continues much longer. The green-eyed maid jokes that Paula is good at caring for people and should promote. She suggests that girls like Catherine might simply be running away from the strict head maid. Claire remains silent and thoughtful while her companions continue their lighthearted and casual gossip. Claire questions if the head maid is truly as strict as the other girls claim.
With a sudden clatter sounding, Joanna stands up and announces she is finished with her meal.
With a sudden step sounding, Joanna walks away from the table, leaving the group.
Joanna gives a subtle nod sounding as she glances back one last time at Claire.
Claire reacts with a sudden gasp sounding, realization dawning as she watches the roommate depart.
Claire wonders why Joanna is acting so strangely as she watches her leave the dining room.
Joanna stands alone in the hallway, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed. Claire approaches Joanna with a sudden step sounding, asking what is wrong with her today. Joanna asks if Claire heard the gossip about the missing girl, Catherine, earlier.
Joanna turns with a sudden glare sounding, her expression becoming dark and accusatory toward Claire.
She asks if Claire was the one who helped a kidnapper abduct the girl. Claire's face fills with a sudden flinch, sounding as she asks Joanna what she means.
With a sudden whip sounding, Joanna reveals the stolen list and claims this is her evidence.
Claire lets out a sudden gasp, sounding as she realizes her secret has been discovered. Claire demands to know if Joanna rummaged through her personal luggage to find the paper. Joanna glares with a sudden humph sounding, calling Claire trash while dismissing her anger.
The black-haired maid confronts Claire in a dark hallway, their expressions filled with unspoken tension.
Claire questions the validity of a document, noting it fails to prove anything since Catherine's name is absent. Letting out a sudden, loud bang sounding, the black-haired maid aggressively pins Claire against the wooden wall.
The dark-haired maid smiles mockingly, asking Claire if she is truly certain about her bold claims. Claire examines the Devil's Tonic memo, identifying the substance mentioned as the illicit and dangerous drug Gusian. Letting out a sudden, soft humph sounding, the black-haired maid suggests the drug facilitates easy kidnappings of women. Letting out a sudden, sharp glare sounding, the two women lock eyes in a tense and silent standoff. The dark-haired maid laughs coldly, asking if Claire intends to deny the evidence they are currently discussing. Letting out a sudden, quick shove sounding, she dismisses Claire's defense, claiming the matter is not worth debating. Letting out a sudden, long sigh sounding, Claire listens as the other woman mocks her misplaced confidence. Claire questions her rival's true intentions, pointing out that multiple women besides Catherine have gone missing lately. Letting out a sudden, quick clench sounding, the black-haired maid argues her recent arrival proves she isn't involved. Claire asks if this was a deliberate attempt to trap her, leaving the other maid looking visibly confused. Claire asserts her innocence and states that a mere provocation won't make her reveal any secrets to her. Claire explains she received the mysterious memo from laundry room workers who were unable to decipher the handwriting. Letting out a sudden, soft humph sounding, the dark-haired maid looks away in annoyance after hearing Claire's explanation. Claire notes that despite her opponent's nonchalant attitude, she is actually the one in a very tight spot. Letting out a sudden, sharp glare sounding, the black-haired maid demands to know what Claire's cryptic warning means. Claire turns the tables by threatening to testify that the black-haired maid is actually a man in disguise. Claire points out that as the only man in the quarters, he would be the primary kidnapping suspect. Letting out a sudden, soft puffed sounding, Claire mocks his physical advantage as a tool for his illicit deeds. Claire turns away, mentioning she wants to avoid attention, but remains angry about her luggage being searched. The dark-haired maid asks about her ultimate goal as she prepares to walk away from their intense confrontation. Letting out a sudden, soft smile sounding, Claire suggests they would actually make a highly effective team. Letting out a sudden, quick flinch sounding, the black-haired individual reacts with shock to Claire's unexpected alliance proposal. Claire describes the alliance as a realistic turn of events while they maintain an intense and suspicious glare. Claire wonders about Catherine's fate and muses that appearances can be deceiving as she watches other maids nearby. Letting out a sudden, soft whisper sounding, Claire suggests they finish their secret conversation later tonight in private. The dark-haired maid warns Claire not to run away as their tense meeting comes to a close. The disguised maid demands the return of the memo, but Claire continues walking away without complying. The black-haired maid glares suspiciously at the brown-haired girl's retreating figure with a deeply furrowed brow. Claire holds the document firmly, stating their talk won't continue unless she gets the information she seeks. Letting out a sudden, sharp ch sounding, the black-haired maid reacts with a quick shove sounding against the door. Letting out a sudden, quick turn sounding, the dark-haired maid looks away in visible frustration and annoyance. Letting out a series of rhythmic stomp soundings, the maid departs while Claire exhales a relieved pew sounding. Letting out a series of rhythmic chatter soundings, other maids gossip together in the bright, sun-drenched hallway. Letting out a series of rhythmic clack soundings, Claire considers how to report her findings to the commander. Claire worries that her report might be dismissed despite the scent on the memo and a specific name. A glowing paper reveals the name Townsend as Claire wonders if the commander would believe her evidence. Claire recalls how Edgar saved Lord Albert during the war, leading to a bond of deep trust. Claire hesitates to act carelessly and risk making an enemy of the Knight's Order while walking alone. Letting out a sudden, soft gasp sounding, Claire is surprised by the arrival of the smiling, black-haired Edgar. Edgar points to a small tear on his sleeve, asking if there is anyone available to repair it. Letting out a series of rhythmic clamor soundings, several maids eagerly offer their sewing services to the knight. Letting out a sudden, loud kia sounding, the maids squeal with excitement while Claire watches in total disbelief. Reacting with a sudden, quick gasp sounding, Claire takes the jacket from the knight's hands to handle it. Letting out a sudden, quick bow sounding, Claire requests that Edgar accompany her to finish the repair elsewhere. Letting out a sudden, soft beam sounding, Edgar smiles as he prepares to follow the brown-haired maid away. Letting out a sudden, loud grrr sounding, the other maids seethe with jealousy as the pair departs. Claire leads the knight through a doorway, finding a private space to continue their conversation and investigation. Looking toward the window, Claire thinks about her ability to flee if things turn dangerous. Her gaze shifts to Edgar as she wonders how he might react to the incriminating memo. Letting out a sudden, quick bow sounding, she apologizes to the black-haired knight for her report. Edgar reassures the maid that he isn't there to pressure her regarding her current progress. She suggests mending his torn sleeve while she provides the details of her recent findings. Claire insists she cannot permit him to leave the room while his uniform remains damaged. Letting out a sudden, quick clack sounding, she prepares her sewing kit while Edgar watches silently. As she begins the repair, she contemplates the best way to present her gathered information.
Edgar asks if she is faring well, acknowledging the difficulty of her current undercover role.
Letting out a sudden, quick shake sounding, she admits the situation is better than her past.
The knight absorbs her words with a solemn expression, reflecting on her surprising personal admission. Letting out a sudden, quick tug sounding, her focus remains entirely on mending the black fabric.
Claire asks the knight if he is familiar with a man named Alphys Grismer.
Edgar admits his ignorance regarding the name, questioning if the individual is of noble birth.
Letting out a sudden, quick reach sounding, she explains the target is a drug merchant.
She presents the document to him, prompting the knight to question the nature of the paper.
Letting out a sudden, sharp gasp sounding, Edgar reacts with visible shock to the writing.
Claire notes the letter appears to have been written by a man rather than a woman.
She draws his attention specifically to the section regarding the illicit tonic mentioned within the text.
Edgar asks where the document was discovered while holding it up for a closer inspection.
Letting out a sudden, quick turn sounding, she reveals the memo was found among the laundry. The knight asks how she determined the document's ownership was linked to the drug merchant.
Claire recalls a sweet, overwhelming scent associated with the man that still lingers on the paper.
Edgar is visibly taken aback by the specific details she shares about the merchant's fragrance.
He asks if she shared a personal bond with the man, leaving her looking utterly bewildered.
Letting out a sudden, soft blush sounding, Edgar looks away while Claire reacts with alarm.
Letting out a sudden, loud zoom sounding, she vigorously denies having any inappropriate connection with him. Letting out a sudden, loud shout sounding, she clarifies that she simply remembered the peculiar scent.
Edgar acknowledges her explanation while returning his focus to the strategic importance of the memo.
Letting out a sudden, quick flinch sounding, Claire listens as Edgar mentions her restless behavior.
Letting out a sudden, soft, sounding, she listens as Edgar admits his own family's suspicions. Edgar pledges his unwavering loyalty to the commander amidst a backdrop of blooming blue roses. He explains that his ties to the Townsend household have effectively been severed at this point. The knight reveals his family cast him aside long ago, leaving him with no allegiance. Edgar stands firm as he describes the complete lack of belonging he feels toward his kin. Letting out a sudden, quick gasp sounding, Claire stares at him with a look of disbelief.
Letting out a sudden, soft smile sounding, he describes himself as a mere spare for the heir.
He elaborates on his status as the younger brother who was despised by the true successor. Remembering his childhood, he realizes he was always an outsider within his own wealthy family. Letting out a sudden, quick clench sounding, she feels a profound sense of kinship with him. Edgar recounts how the commander's intervention provided him a new purpose within the Knight's Order.
Surrounded by blue flowers, he reaffirms his total dedication to the leader who saved him.
Letting out a sudden, soft sounding, Edgar calls her name, noticing her distressed expression.
He asks why she looks so troubled, prompting her to hide her sudden wave of emotion.
Claire dismisses his concern while continuing her work, claiming that nothing is actually wrong.
The room falls silent as she finishes the repairs under the knight's watchful, curious gaze. She hands over the mended jacket and the incriminating document, entrusting the evidence to him.
Edgar accepts the items and promises to deliver the report directly to the commander.
Claire asks if he has any suspicions regarding which relatives might be involved with the drug.
Edgar admits he suspects his immediate family might even be the ringleaders behind the scheme.
Edgar reflects on his household's true nature while holding a cloth-wrapped bundle in his hands.
Letting out a soft creak sounding, Claire opens the door and enters a dimly lit room.
A light gray-haired maid sits waiting, bluntly stating that Claire is late for their secret meeting.
Claire notes the light gray-haired maid is early before demanding they skip the formalities and talk.
Letting out a sudden humph sounding, the light gray-haired maid questions the logic of teaming up. Claire asks if the light gray-haired maid is present solely to serve their master's mysterious interests. Claire suggests they share a goal, causing the light gray-haired maid to react with visible confusion.
Letting out a sudden flinch sounding, the light gray-haired maid is startled by Claire's bold claim. The light gray-haired maid covers their mouth, processing the realization that their goals might actually align.
Claire stares intensely as she reveals she has discovered the true origin of the illegal drug.
Suddenly, the light gray-haired maid draws a sharp knife and pins Claire against the dark wall. Demanding answers, the light gray-haired maid asks for Claire's true identity at the edge of a blade.
Claire asks for the knife to be lowered, while the maid demands the source's name first.
Claire argues that simple knowledge isn't enough proof, making their cooperation absolutely vital for their success.
The light gray-haired maid shouts that proof is unnecessary as long as the distributor is found.
A heavy, expectant silence fills the room as the two characters stand locked in a standoff.
Claire notes the knife is misplaced and reaffirms that teaming up is their only viable option.
Letting out a sudden grit sounding, the two maintain an intense stare as the pressure mounts. The light gray-haired maid finally yields, slowly lowering the sharp blade from Claire's vulnerable neck.
Letting out a quick turn sounding, the maid asks how they should begin their secret cooperation.
Claire senses the light gray-haired maid has a personal obsession with Gushin beyond their master's orders.
Letting out a sudden freeze sounding, the light gray-haired maid stops when Claire mentions Alphys Grisner.
Letting out a quick turn sounding, the light gray-haired maid asks if Alphys is the source. Letting out a sudden creak sounding, the maid ponders the name while Claire admits she lacks proof. Twirling the knife, the light gray-haired maid asks Claire what her next move will be. Claire declares she intends to punish the man severely but finds immediate execution far too boring. Claire envisions Alphys chained and broken, wanting him to lose his status and experience total despair.
Letting out a soft smirk sounding, Claire remembers a man from her past life who ruined her.
Letting out a sudden chills sounding, the light gray-haired maid is visibly unsettled by Claire's cold intensity. The maid believes Claire's sincerity while Claire expresses relief that her partner finally understands her motives. Agreeing to the plan, the light gray-haired maid asks how they will specifically punish the bastard Alphys. Letting out a soft smile sounding, Claire smiles enigmatically as blue flowers bloom around her. The grand royal palace glows brightly under the starry night sky during the massive evening soiree.
Narrative text explains the royal family is hosting a grand soiree for the local noble families.
Noblemen and ladies in fine attire mingle across the expansive, ornate floor of the palace ballroom.
Duke Townsend and Howard Townsend laugh together while holding glasses of wine at the crowded party. Watching from the shadows, Claire asks a dark-haired maid if the target has finally been spotted. Claire reflects on her father's questionable morals and his willingness to risk everything for the Gushin. Observing Duke Townsend, the dark-haired maid asks if her only job is to remain close. Claire commands the dark-haired maid to perform well, drawing an offended reaction from her disguised partner.
The dark-haired maid crosses her arms, questioning if their current plan is enough to destroy them.
Claire insists they need concrete evidence and must manipulate the family's internal relationships to succeed. Claire aims for total destruction while the dark-haired maid acknowledges her partner's incredible patience. Moving with a rhythmic roll sounding, the dark-haired maid pushes a cart past a group of admirers. Claire thinks that nobody would guess the beautiful maid is actually a man in a clever disguise. Moving with a sudden glance sounding, Claire searches the crowded room for a specific, dangerous individual. Letting out a sudden kaya sounding, a group of ladies cheers as a handsome nobleman appears.
Surrounded by blushing admirers, Edgar stands in the ballroom as Claire notes his immense popularity.
Letting out a sudden gasp sounding, Claire's eyes widen in shock as she spots a target. The name Alphys stands out against a dark, fragmented background, signaling a shift in the investigation. Alphys Grisner mingles among the nobility, enjoying a glass of red wine during the royal soiree. Claire moves cautiously through the ballroom, her maid uniform making her nearly invisible to the high society guests. Looking back over the shoulder of a guest, Claire keeps her focus on her target's every movement. Claire's eye widens in shock as she lets out a cry of disbelief regarding the scene before her. Alphys stands beside Anefia, who wears a vibrant red dress as flower petals drift around them both. Watching from afar, Claire questions why Alphys is together with the blonde woman in the red dress. Alphys glances back toward Claire's direction, causing the young maid to duck down and hide herself quickly. The brown-haired man searches the crowd with a suspicious expression, while Claire remains hidden from his view. Her heart races as a sudden, firm grab startles her, making her realize he noticed her. Letting out a sudden gasp sounding, Claire looks up to find Edgar holding her arm in the ballroom. Alphys approaches, asking if he is addressing a member of the Townsend family and specifically identifying Lord Edgar. Letting out a sudden nod sounding, Edgar acknowledges the greeting, while Claire wonders if she should leave. Behind Alphys, Anefia hides her face behind a fan, looking visibly annoyed by the sudden, unwanted interruption. Clinging to Alphys's arm, Anefia declares that their meeting again is surely a sign of destined fate. In a brief memory, Edgar asks Anefia if they have met before, leaving the young woman stunned. Letting out a sudden grit sounding, Alphys teases Anefia about being stuck in an unrequited love with Edgar. Letting out a soft bow sounding, the man introduces himself as Alphys Grisner and offers a greeting. Edgar stares intently at the newcomer, mentioning he has heard that Alphys Grisner is simply a merchant. Alphys smiles enigmatically, asking Edgar if he learned of his status through his own elder brother instead. Edgar asks to hear more details in person while Alphys smiles and accepts the invitation quite politely. Claire watches the trio walk away together, the tension of the meeting lingering in the ballroom. Letting out a sudden rush sounding, Claire hurries through the palace doors to escape the prying eyes. Claire admits her carelessness, realizing she had no idea the pair shared a connection from earlier. Claire reflects that Anefia is a baron's daughter whose status shouldn't allow her at the royal soiree. Letting out a soft sigh sounding, Claire worries about the consequences if her parents find her out. Looking back toward the ballroom, Claire wonders to herself if Edgar is truly all right after his meeting. Letting out a sudden peak sounding, Claire doubts alphas can harm Edgar, but remains deeply unsettled. Guests excitedly announce the arrival of Her Royal Highness, praising the Queen for her immense beauty.
Dressed in a majestic purple gown, the Queen walks through the palace, flanked by 2 loyal maids.
Moving with a rhythmic step sounding, the Queen passes by as Claire lowers her head and bows. Claire watches closely as the royal party moves past her, noting every detail of their high-status appearances.
Claire's eyes fill with shock as she realizes the identity of the woman she is currently looking at.
Stunned, Claire watches the Queen depart while the realization of a hidden truth hits her with force.
Claire realizes the Queen was Alphas' companion in the woods, though she couldn't hear their secret conversation.
Claire peeks from the shadows as the Queen and her maids disappear into the depths of the palace. Letting out a soft sigh sounding, Claire leans against a tree outside, hoping she is finally safe. Looking at the glowing palace, Claire questions the nature of the relationship between alphas and the Queen. Claire recalls the mention of the drug, wondering if the Queen pushed for the war to happen. A singular thought haunts Claire, questioning if the mastermind behind the war was actually the Queen herself. Claire reflects on the Queen's image, noting she never heard of her supporting any such military conflict. Claire thinks that if the Queen were involved, the commander would have suspected her from the beginning. Unable to understand the mystery, Claire decides she must report these findings to the commander immediately.
A woman's voice shouts for release, startling Claire as the sounds of a struggle echo nearby.
On a balcony, a man tells a struggling lady not to be dull while holding her hostage. Recognizing the man, Claire watches him smirk while he claims they should get along as fellow loners. Claire notices the dark stains on the bottom of the woman's dress, indicating a previous struggle. Claire realizes the blonde man on the balcony shares the exact same unsettling scent as the merchant. Letting out a sudden rustle sounding, the woman screams for him to stop as he continues advancing. The blonde man's face is cast in shadow as he lets out a sudden smirk sounding wickedly. Letting out a sudden thump sounding, Claire gasps as the man reveals a vial of pink liquid. Moving with a sudden dash sounding, Claire sprints through the palace halls toward the end. Claire pushes through a group of confused guests while a sudden push sounding echoes. Bursting through the balcony doors with a sudden bang sounding, Claire finds a startling scene. A blonde nobleman turns around in shock, questioning why the maid is intruding so suddenly. Moving with a rhythmic clack sounding, Claire approaches the man who holds a collapsed woman. Letting out a sudden gasp sounding, Claire recognizes a familiar scent from the unconscious guest. With a sudden clasp sounding, Claire reaches out to examine the woman's condition more closely. The blonde man expresses confusion, finally realizing he is speaking to a common castle maid. Claire warns that the guest is barely breathing and demands they find a doctor immediately.
The nobleman is visibly shaken by the news, stammering in disbelief at the sudden medical emergency.
Claire shouts for help, informing the nearby crowd that the woman's condition is extremely dire. A sudden clamor sounding rises as the guests realize something has gone terribly wrong. Letting out a sudden dash sounding, the panicked blonde man flees the balcony into the crowd. Moving with a heavy stomp sounding, the man disappears while Claire stays with the woman. 2 maids in red uniforms arrive to support the collapsed woman and lead her away. A soft chatter sounding fills the air as Claire watches the guest being taken for treatment. Claire notices a pink vial on the ground and crouches down to investigate the evidence. Moving with a quick flip sounding, Claire picks up the small bottle of suspicious pink liquid. The scene shifts to Edgar standing in a dark hallway while looking back with concern. Letting out a soft creak sounding, Edgar peers into a room to check on the situation. Claire asks Edgar if he is all right, her expression filled with worry for her companion. Letting out a sudden bam sounding, the door shuts as the two discuss their findings. Edgar approaches Claire with a sudden step sounding, asking about her conversation from earlier today. Letting out a soft creak sounding, Edgar sits down and insists Claire hear his latest discovery. Edgar explains that his brother, Howard, seems to be involved in distributing the drug Gushin. Edgar shakes his head while explaining that simply possessing the substance warrants a heavy punishment. Claire listens intently as Edgar reflects on the shady business occurring within the royal castle. Claire recalls that in her previous life, Edgar's brother died due to a mysterious accident. She notes that the tragic event happened before any marriage talks with Anefia had begun. Claire suspects Howard's accident was actually linked to a suspicious deal he made with alphas. Claire asks Edgar if there is anything else he wants the others to eventually know. Edgar reveals that alphas came to the castle specifically to discuss Gushin with the queen. Edgar reacts with a sudden look of shock, his expression filling with deep and sudden worry. Claire notices that Edgar seems more shocked by the queen's involvement than his brother's crimes. Claire admits she couldn't see the queen's face clearly, but her head maid was nearby. Edgar explains that this information makes the suspicions against his brother feel even more valid. Edgar reveals that the queen is actually his aunt, explaining their close and complicated family bond.
Claire is struck by a sudden realization as she imagines the queen surrounded by her maids.
The scene shifts back to the grand ballroom filled with many elegantly dressed noble guests.
A black-haired maid moves through the crowded room with a sudden and rhythmic clack sounding.
Letting out a sudden gasp sounding, the maid looks around the hall with a fearful expression.
Howard speaks with a woman in a purple dress while rose petals fall around them.
Hiding behind a pillar, the black-haired maid watches the interaction between Howard and the woman.
Howard compliments the woman's beauty while addressing her as Her Royal Highness with a bow.
Letting out a soft giggle sounding, the woman smiles as Howard politely kisses her hand.
Howard tells the noblewoman that her beauty shines brightly no matter how often they meet. The queen notes that Howard has grown up well himself while she accepts his charming praise. Howard reflects on their close relationship and the power his family holds under the queen's authority.
The black-haired maid continues to watch them from the shadows with a very tense expression.
Letting out a sudden thud sounding, Joanna's eyes fill with terror as her identity is discovered. A sudden menacing sounding fills the air as Joanna looms darkly over a startled Claire. Joanna smirks while ordering Claire to follow her, dragging the maid through a crowd.
Claire stares ahead with a cold, focused intensity as she plans her next move.
Claire reacts with a sharp gasp as a sudden realization flashes through her mind.
The scene shifts to Howard interacting with the queen while a sudden glare sounding echoes.
Howard smiles confidently while holding a glass of mysterious pink liquid at the royal gathering.
The scene fades into a white haze, marking a quiet transition in the narrative flow.
Claire asks Edgar if he's referring to his aunt during their private late-night conversation.
Edgar admits his aunt is a proper person, but lacks true purity or innocence.
Edgar explains she is his father's sibling, while Claire reflects on his difficult family environment.
Edgar wonders if his family is a burden, finding a deep similarity between their lives.
A heavy silence settled over the room as the two continue their somber evening discussion.
Claire is distracted by a sudden, cheerful laugh sounding coming from the window nearby.
Looking outside, Claire spots a blonde nobleman and a woman in pink enjoying the gardens. Letting out a sudden gasp sounding, Claire quickly apologizes for her brief moment of distraction. Edgar notes Claire attended the soiree even though she hasn't had her debutante yet.
The two share a quiet, meaningful look as the weight of their situation lingers.
Letting out a soft giggle sounding, Claire hides her smile behind her hand. Claire laughs while mentioning she never expected to hear such a comment from anyone else. Edgar asks what is wrong, while Claire thanks him for his very kind consideration.
Claire tells him not to feel sorry for her as blue flowers bloom around her.
Edgar remarks that Claire is a lady whose strength could easily defeat a man like him.
Claire pouts while claiming his statement is quite rude to a maiden like herself.
A sudden ha-ha-ha sounding fills the air as the pair laughs together in the garden. Edgar smiles warmly while noting that he is glad to see Claire smiling once again.
Claire reflects on the difficulty of suspecting family while imagining Howard with a guest.
Letting out a sudden gasp sounding, Claire reacts when Edgar calls out her name. Claire shakes her head to clear her thoughts before trying to move the conversation alone. Claire notes that because Alphas contacted the Queen, suspicion against Duke Townsend has increased. Edgar stands up and confirms that he is already well aware of that troubling fact.
Moving with a rhythmic step sounding, Edgar walks away while acknowledging he must brace himself.
Edgar suggests they leave separately and warns Claire to refrain from acting too recklessly.
Letting out a tired sigh sounding, Claire reflects on successfully completing her latest report. Narrative text explains the failed trap involving Gushin and the lack of evidence for Albert. Claire ponders their next move,
realizing they desperately need solid evidence to proceed. A hand reaches for a pink vial as Claire gasps in sudden, shocking realization. Claire exclaims in shock, realizing that if a certain person is involved, everything changes.
Letting out a soft creak sounding, the doors open as Claire arrives in noble attire.
Marquise Baston identifies Claire as the lady who saved his daughter's life at the palace. The nobleman is ecstatic to meet her, calling her the savior of the Baston family. Moving with a quick clack sounding, Stephanie Baston interjects, claiming Claire is her guest. Stephanie watches the scene over her fan with a pair of sharp green eyes.
The blonde woman officially introduces herself as Stephanie Bastion while holding her green fan. Stephanie welcomes Claire to the estate as flower petals drift through the sunlit air. Stephanie mentions that their family pastry chef is highly skilled as they begin walking.
Moving with a rhythmic step sounding, the group walks down a grand, red-carpeted hallway.
Stephanie says showing hospitality is her duty, while her father looks on in shock.
Stephanie confirms her father is uninvolved, while he reacts with comical, tearful despair.
Claire waves while Stephanie tells her father to stop crying and return to his work.
Stephanie smiles brightly and asks Claire to follow her further into the grand estate.
Claire and Stephanie sit at a flower-adorned table on a sunlit balcony with a maid.
The dark-haired maid quietly pours tea into a white porcelain cup for awaiting Claire.
Stephanie sips her tea, thanking Claire for coming and apologizing for her father's embarrassing behavior. Stephanie explains her father is protective of his only daughter. Claire finds their relationship wonderful. Claire takes a quiet sip of her tea while the sun shines on the daben.
Stephanie sighs and thanks Claire again, unable to imagine what would happen without her help.
Claire waves her hands, insisting she was simply fulfilling her duty as a castle maid.
Stephanie notes that Claire was supposed to be in the courtyard when the incident occurred.
A white speech bubble hanging in a void asks why Claire went to that specific location.
Letting out a sudden gulp sounding, Claire notices Stephanie's sharp green eyes filled with suspicion.
Claire finds a question convenient, explaining she went because a man was bothering the lady. Stephanie smiles, noting that such behavior wouldn't be strange if it were caused only by wine.
Claire looks down and asks for pardon before continuing her explanation of the day's events.
Claire explains to Stephanie that she accidentally heard the pair arguing before the incident occurred.
Stephanie's sharp green eye narrows as she listens intently to Claire's account of the argument.
Claire states she can report the full details of what she heard if Stephanie wishes it.
Claire explained she came in person to ask Stephanie's opinion to avoid disgracing her family.
Claire looks at Stephanie's reflection, seeing her companion's somber expression as she processes the news.
Stephanie stares ahead with a dazed expression, realizing the truth behind the events that transpired. Stephanie admits Claire's tactfulness saved her from shameful rumors and a great deal of trouble.
Stephanie apologizes for her interrogation, while Claire responds that she fully understands the lady's concerns. Stephanie praises Claire's impeccable manners, noting she truly acts like a maid from the castle. Stephanie admits she initially worried Claire requested the meeting to extort her for more money.
Claire asks Stephanie how her condition has been since the incident at the royal palace.
A sinister man smirks in a dark flashback, while Stephanie admits she didn't know the drink.
Stephanie crosses her arms, frustrated that she cannot remember the details of what happened that night. Stephanie complains that the man is incredibly annoying and acts like a complete hedonist.
Stephanie identifies him as the playboy third son of the Mayweather household whom she should avoid.
Letting out a sudden squeeze sounding, Claire grips her skirt upon hearing the Mayweather name mentioned. Letting out a sudden gasp sounding, Claire realizes the man shares the same scent as Alpha's.
Stephanie apologizes for scaring her guest, though Claire quickly insists that she is perfectly fine.
Stephanie presses her gloved hands together in a polite gesture of apology and sincere regret.
Letting out a sudden giggle sounding, the two discuss how soirees differ from romance novel tropes. Stephanie beams with excitement, asking Claire if she also enjoys reading various romance novels. Claire reflects on reading different novels in her previous life while looking away with a blush. Stephanie excitedly asks if Claire has read the novel about star-crossed lovers from enemy countries.
The grand estate stands tall under a golden sunset as a horse-drawn carriage waits outside.
Outside the estate, Stephanie apologizes for staying late while Claire thanks her for the carriage. Stephanie invites Claire to visit again as Claire politely thanks the lady for her kindness.
Stephanie watches from a distance as Claire walks toward the carriage prepared for her departure.
Moving with a sudden touch, Stephanie places her hand on Claire's shoulder as she approaches. Stephanie leans in close and asks Claire if she is actually a member of the nobility. Stephanie offers her family's assistance if Claire's household ever requires any help in the future. Claire stands dazed as she processes the unexpected offer of support from the young noblewoman. Claire offers a warm, soft smile as flower petals drift around her in the evening light. Claire waves from the departing carriage window while Stephanie waves back from the estate entrance. Sitting in the carriage, Claire reflects on the Mayweather son and his possible link to Alpha's. Claire focuses on her mission, determined to find evidence connecting the Mayweather family to the drug. Claire imagines sending Alphas to prison while shadows of him and Howard loom behind her. Back in her dark room, Claire holds the pink vial, contemplating the next step in her plan.
A door handle turns with a slow, deliberate creak sounding. Claire enters the dark room, the door closing behind her with a sudden, loud bam sounding.
Claire approaches a wooden wardrobe, the latch releasing with a quick clack sounding. Claire looks startled as her partner comments on her unusual lateness. The light gray-haired man sitting on the bed scolds Claire for not greeting him properly.
Claire responds with a sharp glare toward her companion.
Her partner demands a full report on the events that transpired during the soiree. Claire explains she was investigating a lead, prompting a sudden, sharp gasp sounding from the man. Narrative text describes the mysterious collapse of a young noble lady at the royal party. Hiding beneath the sheets, the man denies having any knowledge of the incident. Letting out a quick ch sounding, the man expresses his deep frustration with the headmaid. He asks Claire for further clarification regarding the strange occurrence at the soiree. A sudden, forceful movement creates a jarring impact in the dark room. Claire reveals the lady was poisoned with gushin, causing her partner to let out a rhythmic tremble sounding. The light gray-haired man is visibly stunned by Claire's revelation of the drug's use. Claire recalls seeing a man coercing the lady and notes she questioned her about him earlier. The partner deduces that the culprit was not Alphas Grisner. Claire agrees, noting that Alphas is far too cautious to commit such a visible mistake. Claire informs her partner that the man involved is an acquaintance of his. Claire asks if he remembers the man who left the unused room on her first day. The man appears puzzled, struggling to recall the specific individual Claire is describing.
Claire identifies the culprit as Simeon, the third son of Viscount Mayweather, while blue flowers bloom.
The light gray-haired man focuses intensely on the name Simeon.
Claire suggests that Simeon's foolish reputation makes him an ideal target for gathering information.
The man claims the task for himself, causing Claire to react with a sudden, quick flinch sounding. He insists on handling it properly, but Claire dismissively calls him a dumbass.
A blade is driven forcefully into the bedframe with a sharp, heavy stab sounding.
The man warns Claire not to mistake him for an amateur spy.
Claire stares at him with an expression of cold concern and mild annoyance.
Claire points out he must repair his ruined sheets alone because she won't assist him.
Realizing the damage, the man lets out a sudden, panicked ah sounding.
Morning light fills the ornate hallway of the Royal Palace. A brown-haired maid asks Claire if the maid named Joanna is feeling better.
Disguised, Claire explains that Joanna is currently resting due to fatigue. Claire privately reflects that her partner had already vanished by the time she woke up.
A brief pause in the conversation suggests a change in topic.
The brown-haired maid mentions a rumor that another maid has recently gone missing.
Overcome by a sudden freeze sounding, Claire is visibly shocked by the news of more disappearances.
The brown-haired maid blames the head maid, her expression darkening as she questions Claire's opinion.
Claire hesitates, seemingly unsettled by the maid's intense and accusatory gaze.
The maid asks if Claire is taking the head maid's side in this matter. Claire is momentarily paralyzed by the cold intensity radiating from the other woman.
The brown-haired maid suggests it is more important to find the missing people and confirm the truth.
The two maids stand close together, locked in a tense, silent exchange. Suddenly beaming, the maid hopes they find the culprit soon as flowers surround her.
The brown-haired maid turns away, ending their conversation abruptly.
Claire watches with suspicion as the other maid walks briskly down the palace corridor.
With a low, ominous doom sounding, the maid privately notes Claire's loyalty to the head maid.
In the dark city streets, a heavy footstep creates a rhythmic wobble sounding. A mysterious, cloaked figure moves through the shadows of the silent, moonlit alleyway.
Simeon staggers through a dark and quiet alleyway, appearing deeply troubled and physically exhausted. He lets out a soft rustle sounding while carefully reaching into his ornate purple coat.
Simeon whispers that everything will be fine as long as he possesses the pink vial. An unseen voice from the darkness asks him what will happen since he has that. Letting out a sudden gasp sounding, the blonde man reacts with shock to the intruder.
He tries to flee, but a sudden, quick dash sounding blocks his escape into the night.
A scream of agony fills the air as blood splatters across a dark, abstract background. Simeon falls to the cold ground with a sudden, heavy thud sounding, defeated and weakened. Looking up from the floor, the man demands to know the identity of his assailant. Simeon looks around in total confusion, his eyes wide with fear as he searches the shadows.
The knight's gauntlet makes a sudden, quick click sounding as he prepares for a physical confrontation.
Letting out a sudden, terrified eek sounding, Simeon freezes in fear as the knight approaches. The light gray-haired knight grabs him, stating he has some things he needs to ask him. Surrounded by blue roses, the knight asks the trembling man if he will come along willingly. Panicked shouts echo from the distant buildings as the blonde man is captured in the night. The knight drags him away, ignoring the man's desperate pleas while a heavy drag sounding continues. Moving with a rhythmic step sounding, the knight walks through the palace to report his findings. Letting out a sudden, respectful kneel sounding, the knight greets his superior in the darkened hall. The light gray-haired knight reports his success in catching the person using the drug in the castle. He identifies Simeon as the culprit, explaining the man confessed to multiple crimes after an interrogation. Holding a wine cup, the superior recalls the Viscount being a man of great personal honesty. The knight notes that Simeon is the third son who often neglects his family's high reputation. The superior asks where the captured man managed to get his supply of the Gushin drug. The knight explains the drug was compensation from a moneylender for the man's massive accumulated debts. The superior notes the moneylender's caution and asks about the specific nature of the man's job. The knight reports the job involved forcing young maids to drink the drug and then kidnapping them. The superior finds it odd that no one else has reported the missing maids besides the knight. The knight confirms the disappearances are true, mentioning that multiple maids have vanished from the palace. The shadowy superior contemplates the report while sitting on his throne in the dimly lit room. He promises to investigate, noting suspicious transfer records that lead directly to the Queen's royal palace. Letting out a sudden quick flinch sounding, the knight reacts with shock to the Queen's involvement. An image of the Queen appears as the superior asks if the knight knows anything more. The knight identifies Alphys Grisner as the source who recently gained Her Royal Highness's complete trust. The superior asks for the identity of his collaborator, causing the knight to hesitate for a moment. The light gray-haired knight identifies his partner as Claire, a maid who is also his personal roommate. The superior asks if the girl is a commoner since she lacks a proper family name.
Surrounded by blue roses, the knight describes Claire as a maid who behaves exactly like nobility.
Small panels show Claire working as the knight doubts her noble status due to her skills.
The shadowy man remarks that the situation sounds suspicious and he doesn't fully trust her yet.
The knight reacts with a sudden flinch, sounding as his superior questions his choice of a collaborator.
Raising his cup, the superior orders him to continue his investigation while he does the same.
Letting out a sudden, quick raise sounding, the knight stands up to follow his leader's command. The knight makes a sudden, quick turn sounding and prepares to depart from the Grand Palace Hall.
The shadowy figure sits in silence, holding his wine cup as he contemplates the knight's report. The superior quietly reflects on the concept of trust as blue patterns fill the dark background.
The moon shines brightly over the royal palace, illuminating the quiet gardens and tall stone towers.
Inside a grand office, the duke sits at a desk while 2 military officers stand before him.
Letting out a sudden loud bam sounding, the Duke slams his hand onto the wooden desk.
Moving with a rhythmic step sounding, the black-haired officer approaches the Duke's desk in the office.
Looking out the window, the duke remarks on the tough lineup of royal and high-status opponents.
The brown-bearded superior asks Conrad if he believes the claims, stating he trusts his subordinates.
The red-haired Conrad exclaims that the queen plotting a war is impossible due to her kind nature.
The superior tells Conrad that personal appearance has absolutely nothing to do with the facts of the case. He notes Edgar reported his own family, causing the red-haired man to let out a sudden gasp sounding.
Brushing his hair with a sudden, soft brush sounding, Conrad admits he doesn't believe Edgar lied.
His expression darkens as he states he cannot say the same for the Baron's daughter.
The superior asks if he is accusing Madame Sarah's granddaughter of lying, noting Sarah's upright character.
With a series of sudden, heavy stomp soundings, Conrad argues it's foolish to identify a merchant by scent.
Stepping forward with a sudden, quick step sounding, Edgar asserts that Claire is capable of the feat.
A sudden silence sounding fills the hall as Edgar reacts to the tension with a quick gasp sounding. Surrounded by white roses, the light gray-haired knight stands firm despite the weight of his recent report. Conrad stares at Edgar in total shock, accompanied by a sudden, heavy gloom sounding. Letting out a sudden, dry cough sounding, the superior remarks that doubting their allies is a pointless endeavor. He orders them to investigate Alpha's Grisner while monitoring Duke Townsend and his heir as well. The superior thanks Edgar for his honest report, acknowledging the difficulty of reporting on his own family. He slams the desk with a sudden, loud bang sounding, realizing the queen is plotting a war. The superior declares that they must prevent the impending conflict at all costs. Back in the darkroom, Claire asks for clarification regarding the involvement of a moneylender. Edgar explains a moneylender appeared when Simeon couldn't pay debts at a brothel he frequently visited. Letting out a sudden, soft sigh sounding, Claire laments the terrible situation the Viscount's son has fallen into.
Edgar notes the family disowned him, stating that scum remains scum, even among the noble class.
A memory of a noble lady appears as Claire ponders the phrase about scum and nobility. Claire notes it is confirmed Simeon used Gushin to kidnap palace maids while Edgar gives a sudden nod.
A portrait shows Catherine, who was nearly kidnapped by the lecherous man she once clung to.
Edgar identifies Simeon as a top-class lecher as he grips his sharp blade. With a sudden, quick grin sounding, Edgar guarantees Simeon won't have the guts to approach women again. Claire lets out a soft sounding and reacts with a sudden, quick flinch sounding while deep in thought. She wonders about the current location where the kidnapped maids were taken. Edgar advises Claire to stop meddling in the case for her own safety. Claire remains silent, her face cast in a heavy and somber shadow. Claire asks for the identity of the brothel owner, catching Edgar completely off guard. She intensely demands the name of the establishment where Simeon accumulated his debts.
The two sit in the dimly lit room as Claire repeats her demand for the brothel's name.
Claire stands surrounded by blue and white roses as she focuses intensely on the investigation.
Edgar hesitates for a moment, beginning to answer with a nervous and uncertain expression.
He identifies the brothel as an establishment called the Small Deer Garden. Claire's eye widens in shock as her painful memories are triggered by the brothel's name. Edgar asks why she is nodding to herself as Claire ponders the new information. Claire identifies Alphas as the owner, noting the oddity of the brothel accepting third-party payments. She deduces that Alphas is likely exploiting the vulnerabilities of other nobles through his business. A vision shows Simeon and other men in chains, manipulated by the smiling Alpha's Grisner. Claire remarks that anyone who knows Alphas could predict this, while Edgar appears dazed. Edgar asks Claire how she could possibly know such specific details about the brothel owner. Surrounded by blue roses, Edgar asks if she was a prostitute, reminding her of their privacy agreement. Claire responds with a sudden, intense glare sounding directed at her insensitive partner.
Edgar reacts with a sudden, quick flinch, sounding, appearing regretful for his offensive line of questioning. Narrative text describes how Claire reflects on the unexpected usefulness of the traumatic information she once received. A flashback depicts Alpha's Grisner threatening a captive Claire with detailed descriptions of the brothel. Clenching her fists with a sudden, firm clench sounding, Claire's stomach churns at the traumatic memory. Claire urges Edgar to investigate the brothel area, promising that his efforts will be rewarded. Edgar questions why he is working alone, but Claire dismisses his complaints as being silly. Claire contemplates the kidnapping motives while Edgar reacts with a sudden, quick flinch sounding in surprise. Moving with a sudden, quick spring sounding, Edgar angrily tells Claire to stop meddling in the case.
Edgar warns Claire that her status makes her a prime target for the ongoing palace disappearances.
Claire realizes that being kidnapped herself might be the most efficient way to catch the culprit. A heavy silence falls as the two allies stare at each other in the darkened room. Moving with a rhythmic step sounding, Edgar declares he will handle the investigation's responsibilities by himself. Claire reminds the retreating knight that he was the one complaining about having to work alone. A sudden, loud bang sounding echoes through the hallway as the door is firmly closed. Claire watches him leave, wondering why her partner has started acting in such a weird way. 2 weeks pass without progress while Claire continues her duties as a maid in the palace. War tensions rise daily, yet the internal life of the castle remains largely unchanged for everyone.
Claire predicts a swift victory for the kingdom, confident that the coming conflict won't be large-scale.
A memory of the commander appears, noting he was gravely injured during his time at the front. Claire reflects on the knight's inability to serve and her own lack of obligation to help him. The involvement of Edgar's family with the Gushin drug complicates the situation for the light brown-haired maid. Surrounded by blue roses, Claire realizes that the entire investigation has evolved into a different story. Claire stops in the hallway, suspecting that the recent deaths were far from being simple accidents. A somber shadow falls over Claire's face as she mumbles about the possibility of people being silenced. Letting out a sudden, loud whoosh sounding, a powerful wind scatters leaves across the palace gardens. Moving with a series of sudden, rhythmic tap soundings, Claire pursues a white cloth caught in the wind. The white handkerchief drifts through the air, heading toward a large fountain in the palace grounds. Letting out a sudden, soft flop sounding, the lost handkerchief lands softly among the red roses. A hand reaches into the garden to retrieve the white cloth from the thick rose bushes. Standing in the garden, Claire realizes that a simple maid shouldn't be wandering in this area. Claire continues her internal monologue, feeling increasingly out of place within the restricted palace grounds. Letting out a sudden, terrified scream sounding, a voice echoes as Claire reacts with a quick gasp sounding. Claire stands frozen in the garden, wondering if the source of the shout was nearby. Rustling noises emerge from the bushes as Claire notices a mysterious gated building within the castle. Letting out a sudden, pained ouch sounding and a quick snap sounding, Claire pricks her finger. Claire stares at the small cut on her hand caused by a sharp rose thorn. Moving with a sudden, rhythmic step sounding, an unknown person approaches Claire from behind. Letting out a sudden, quick gasp sounding, a gloved hand covers Claire's mouth to silence her. Moving with a sudden, heavy drag sounding, the blonde-haired man pulls the struggling Claire into the shadows. Claire notices a sweet scent on the cloth and reacts with a sudden, quick shut sounding. Letting out a sudden, heavy thud sounding, the unconscious Claire collapses onto the damp forest floor.
The blonde-haired man looks down at his captive, deciding that the palace security needs to be tightened.
Moving with a sudden, rhythmic brush sounding, the man carries the maid away through the dense trees. Inside a lavish bedroom, Alphys Grisner relaxes with a blonde woman while drinking red wine. Letting out a series of sudden, rhythmic knock soundings, someone interrupts the couple's private moment.
Letting out a sudden, quick creak sounding, a servant enters and asks Alphys to review documents.
Alphys examines the papers while the blonde woman watches him with an intense and expectant stare. The blonde woman urges Alphys to ignore the work and check the documents at a later time. Alphys notes the importance of the moment for their future, but the woman remains visibly displeased. With a sudden, quick smirk sounding, the woman threatens to reveal Alphys's dangerous games with Her Highness.
Alpha's expression turns cold and menacing, causing the blonde woman to react with a sudden, quick flinch sounding.
Alphys regains his composure and offers a calm smile as the blonde woman clings to him. Letting out a sudden, soft peck sounding, Alphys kisses the woman's forehead to soothe her worries. Surrounded by dark roses, Alphys offers to take the stunned woman directly to the queen's palace. Blonde woman reacts with a sudden, soft, puffed sounding and a sudden, quick laugh sounding. Alphys laughs with a sudden, loud sounding as the blonde woman clings to him. The castle stands quiet under the moonlight, harboring secrets within its cold stone walls.
Moving with a series of sudden, rhythmic stomp soundings, Edgar descends the staircase with purpose.
Edgar worries about Claire's safety since she has failed to send her regular reports.
Letting out a series of sudden, rhythmic knock soundings, Edgar wonders if she is safe.
Letting out a sudden, quick creak sounding, a sleepy woman opens the door to investigate. The woman reacts with a sudden, quick gasp sounding upon seeing the knight's formal uniform.
A series of sudden, rhythmic thud soundings and a quick splash sounding occur as Claire sleeps.
Letting out a sudden, quick gasp sounding, Claire wakes up alone within a dark, damp cell.
Letting out a sudden, hung sounding, the bound maid struggles with a sudden, rhythmic stagger sounding.
Claire looks around the bleak prison cell, wondering exactly where her captors have taken her.
Letting out a sudden, soft huh sounding, Claire hears a sob and reacts with a gasp.
Moving with a series of sudden, rhythmic step soundings, Claire approaches the trembling red-haired woman.
Letting out a sudden ah sounding, the redhead shakes with a series of rhythmic tremble soundings. Claire reacts with a sudden, quick gasp sounding as she recognizes the face of the redhead.
Claire calls out Catherine's name, causing the terrified red-haired maid to ask who she is.
Claire realizes that the missing Catherine has been here the entire time she was searching. The two captives sit together on the cold stone floor under the dim dungeon light. Catherine's bare feet are covered in dirt and bruises from her time in the dungeon. Catherine reflects on her past, telling Claire that she once had a secret noble lover. She describes their relationship as amazing, despite the vast social gap between a noble and maid. Catherine laments their impossible romance while the light brown-haired Claire listens with a pale, worried expression. Catherine recalls meeting him and smelling a sweet scent before losing consciousness and waking up here. Catherine explains that she and other maids have faced many horrible things before disappearing forever. Claire asks for confirmation about the presence of other kidnapped palace maids within the building. Catherine states that it is her turn today, leaving Claire confused about what she means. Catherine explains a man takes them away once their medicine wears off, starting with her today. Claire realizes that the medicine Catherine mentioned must be the addictive Gushin drug from earlier. Claire wonders if the captors are waiting for the drug to leave the victim's systems. She contemplates the cruelty of the kidnapper's motives while staring into the dark prison cell. Catherine describes the terrifying process of a man dragging maids away to a screaming end. Catherine screams that she can't take any more of the terror and despair she feels. Letting out a sudden, quick gasp sounding, Catherine desperately asks Claire if Simeon is safe. Claire remains silent, her face cast in a heavy shadow as she processes the question.
Claire apologizes to the distraught redhead, explaining that she does not know anyone named Simeon.
Catherine realizes her mistake, assuming Claire wouldn't know him because he is a high-ranking nobleman.
Claire stares at her cellmate with a somber expression, feeling pity for the broken woman. Moving with a series of sudden, rhythmic step soundings, someone approaches as Claire gasps in fear. A series of sudden, rhythmic step soundings echo as the heavy boots of a man approach.
The two women watch the door in terror as the footsteps grow louder and more ominous. A hooded, bearded man with a facial scar gazes through the bars at the awake captives.
Moving with a series of sudden, rhythmic clank soundings, the man unlocks the heavy prison door.
The man looms over the two terrified women, preparing to take his next victim away. Moving with a sudden, quick yank sounding, the kidnapper grabs the screaming Catherine by her hair. Claire panics as she realizes that the situation has become extremely dangerous for both of them. Moving with a sudden, quick jump sounding, the bound Claire leaps toward the large bearded man. Letting out a sudden, pained ooga sounding and a quick whack sounding, Claire tackles the kidnapper. Moving with a sudden, quick roll sounding and a heavy thud sounding, the man is floored. Letting out a series of sudden, rhythmic choke soundings, Claire chokes the man until he groans. Letting out a sudden, heavy slump sounding, the bearded man falls as Claire maintains her grip. Claire uses a hidden blade to free her hands with a sudden, quick slip sounding. The thick ropes release Claire's wrists with a sudden, loud snap sounding. Moving with a sudden, soft rustle sounding, Claire stands before the shocked and trembling Catherine. Surrounded by blue roses, Claire identifies herself simply as a normal maid to her cellmate. A white-haired man sits anxiously on a bed, reacting with a series of rhythmic twitch soundings. Standing with a sudden, quick spring sounding, the man worries about the girl's prolonged absence. Hearing a series of sudden, rhythmic step soundings, the white-haired man looks toward the nearby window.
Moving with a sudden, quick creak sounding, the white-haired man prepares to exit through the window.
Moving with a sudden, loud jump sounding, the agile man leaps out into the night air. Letting out a sudden, quick creak sounding, Edgar enters a room and asks if it belongs to Claire. Edgar examines the bedding while the head maid notes the unusual frequency of recent maid disappearances. The head maid reacts with a series of rhythmic flinch soundings when Edgar asks for further clarification. The head maid confirms that maids often disappear suddenly, causing Edgar to look increasingly grim. Edgar angrily asks why the knights weren't informed, noting the case falls under their official jurisdiction.
The head maid explains she informed the chamberlain, but he dismissed her report without an investigation. Outside the window, the hooded, white-haired man silently observes the conversation between Edgar and the maid. Edgar decides to report the matter to the knight's commander before turning to leave the room. The door closes firmly, leaving the quiet room behind as the investigation moves outside. Edgar walks down a stone path, his mind occupied by the mysterious disappearances within the castle.
Letting out a sudden, quick rustle sounding and a sudden freeze sounding, Edgar senses an intruder nearby.
Edgar remains alert, his gaze fixed on the dense bushes where he heard the suspicious movement. Moving with a sudden, loud jump sounding, the hooded man descends from a tree behind the bait. Letting out a sudden, heavy thud sounding, the man lands and faces Edgar's drawn sword. Facing the knight, the hooded man reacts with a series of sudden, rhythmic grin soundings. Claire and Edgar appear together in a decorative frame, symbolizing their partnership in the ongoing mystery.
The two men stand poised for combat on the palace grounds under the bright moonlight.
The man calls Edgar's visit careless as the knight reacts with a sudden, quick freeze sounding. Letting out a sudden, soft fuzz sounding, the man asks if Claire is working for the order.
Moving with a sudden, quick dash sounding, Edgar lunges at the mysterious man with his blade.
Letting out a sudden, loud crash sounding, Edgar slams the intruder against a large tree trunk. Edgar demands to know Claire's location, while the intruder reacts with a sudden, quick, curt sounding.
The white-haired man tells Edgar to stop wasting time as they struggle against the tree.
Moving with a sudden, quick swing sounding, Edgar continues his aggressive interrogation of the mysterious intruder.
Letting out a sudden, loud clank sounding, the intruder kicks Edgar's sword away during the scuffle.
Moving with a sudden, quick dash sounding, the white-haired man attempts to distance himself from Edgar.
Letting out a sudden, quick grab sounding, Edgar catches the man and pulls him back.
Edgar reacts with a series of rhythmic squeeze soundings, demanding the intruder reveal Claire's whereabouts immediately. An unknown voice interrupts the confrontation, causing both men to react with a sudden, quick gasp sounding. Letting out a sudden, quick slip sounding, the man escapes Edgar's grasp during the unexpected interruption. Reacting with a series of rhythmic throb soundings, the man retreats as a voice expresses mild surprise. The white-haired man tells Edgar to follow him as he begins to lead the way. Moving with a series of sudden, rhythmic step soundings, the man moves away while Edgar watches.
Edgar follows the mysterious man with his sword ready, the scene shifting away from the gardens.
Moving with a series of rhythmic step soundings, Claire helps the exhausted Catherine through the dark hallways.
Claire and Catherine hide as guards run past, shouting orders to catch the escaped prisoners. Claire peeks around a corner with a series of rhythmic land soundings to ensure the path is clear. Letting out a series of rhythmic huff soundings, the defeated Catherine tells Claire to leave her behind. Catherine blames her own foolishness for their predicament, her face illuminated by a soft floral light. Catherine insists that Claire shouldn't suffer because of her mistakes as they pause in their escape. Moving with a sudden, soft kneel sounding, Claire settles beside the traumatized redhead on the floor.
Claire looks Catherine in the eyes, clarifying that her help is not born of personal affection.
Recalling her past, Claire explains she simply refuses to become like those who abandon others.
Moving with a sudden, heavy huff sounding, Claire helps the weak maid to her feet. Moving with a series of rhythmic step soundings, Claire carries Catherine down the dark castle corridor. Rain falls over the castle spires with a series of sudden, rhythmic drip soundings. Within a lavish, dimly lit bathroom, a light brown-haired woman relaxes in a large white tub. Letting out a sudden, soft foo-foo sounding, the woman expresses her gratitude toward the mysterious alphas. Letting out a sudden, rhythmic drip sounding, the woman notes they can now obtain fresh ingredients. Accompanied by a series of rhythmic splash soundings, an elderly maid waits patiently near the bath. Thunder rumbles with a series of sudden, rhythmic rumble soundings as the woman enjoys her bath. Moving with a series of rhythmic rub soundings, she obsessively declares her need for more ingredients. The maid pours dark fluid into the tub while the woman laughs with delight. Letting out a sudden, loud laughter sounding, the woman revels in the crimson petals surrounding her. Moving with a series of sudden, rhythmic knock soundings, someone seeks entry to the private chambers. Moving with a sudden, quick snap sounding, the woman calmly invites the visitor to come inside. Moving with a sudden, quick creak sounding, a man in formal attire enters the room. The man quickly turns his back, blushing as he frantically apologizes for his unintended rudeness. The woman asks what happened while the man reports that the two prisoners have escaped.
She looks disappointed, remarking that their escape means she will lack ingredients for tomorrow's bath.
The man begins to leave the silent bathroom as the woman remains deep in thought. Reacting with a sudden, soft beam sounding, the woman suddenly realizes a new source for ingredients. Pointing her finger, she commandingly tells the young man to approach the edge of the tub. Moving with a series of sudden, rhythmic step soundings, the man hesitantly nears the bathing woman. Moving with a series of rhythmic rub soundings, she admires the firmness of the man's skin. The maid swings a weapon behind the man while the woman expresses her newfound jealousy.
Letting out a sudden, loud whack sounding, the scene is consumed by a violent splash of red. Moving with a series of rhythmic splash soundings, the woman hums contentedly amidst the floating roses.
Thunder rumbles over the bathroom, where the man's body now lies still on the cold floor.
Letting out a sudden, loud shh sounding, the storm intensifies over the massive castle grounds. Moving with a series of rhythmic huff soundings, Claire runs through the rain carrying Catherine. Claire desperately rattles the metal bars, panicking because the gate to their freedom is locked. Letting out a sudden, loud bam sounding, a heavy spiked club slams into the wet ground. Letting out a sudden, loud command sounding, an invisible voice orders the fleeing women to stop. The bearded kidnapper laughs, mockingly telling the women that their game of tag is finally over.
Moving with a series of sudden rhythmic step soundings, Claire positions herself defensively before Catherine.
Moving with a sudden, quick swing sounding, the large man prepares to strike with his mace.
Claire glares at the attacker with a determined expression, refusing to back down from the threat.
Letting out a sudden, loud scream sounding, the atmosphere becomes heavy with impending violence and dread. The two women look on in absolute horror as the rain drenches their pale, terrified faces.
The man lets out a sudden, rhythmic grin sounding while raising his spiked weapon to strike.
Moving with a sudden, quick shut sounding, Claire closes her eyes as the weapon descends toward her. Letting out a sudden, loud scream sounding, Claire shields Catherine from the kidnapper's powerful downward strike.
Moving with a sudden, soft peak sounding, Claire cautiously opens one eye to see what happened.
Edgar suddenly appears, effortlessly blocking the heavy spiked mace with the blade of his sword.
Claire gasps in disbelief, questioning why Lord Edgar is here in the middle of the storm.
Edgar calls out to the girls, urgently directing them to move toward his location immediately.
The white-haired man reaches out from behind the gate, offering his hand to help them. Claire looks back at the redhead, surprised to find that Joanna is also involved in the rescue. Moving with a sudden, quick kneel sounding, Claire reaches out to support the trembling and exhausted Catherine. Claire urges the white-haired Joanna to take the exhausted Catherine to safety as the heavy rain continues. Moving with a sudden, soft step sounding, Joanna carries Catherine away while Claire watches them depart. Joanna warns Claire that enemies will soon catch up and urgently tells her she must come along. Claire remains resolute, explaining that her work inside the palace is not yet complete. A character reacts with a sudden, quick grit sounding as the situation in the garden becomes desperate. Moving with a sudden, quick dash sounding, the white-haired Joanna runs off into the rainy night. Letting out a sudden, loud crash sounding, Edgar blocks the kidnapper's massive spiked mace with his blade. Letting out a sudden, rhythmic stomp sounding, the bearded kidnapper roars as he charges forward again. The kidnapper rises aggressively while Edgar stands firm, gripping his sword tightly for the next impact. Moving with a sudden, quick slash sounding, Edgar delivers a powerful counterattack against his powerful opponent. Letting out a sudden, loud scream sounding, the injured kidnapper collapses in a violent splash of red. Reacting with a series of rhythmic tremble soundings, the defeated man stays down on the wet ground. Letting out a sudden, loud dash sounding, the kidnapper lunges forward for one final, desperate strike. Edgar looks hesitant, his brows sweating as he watches the man charge toward him one more time. Edgar realizes he cannot bring himself to kill the man since he is his aunt's servant. Lightning strikes a nearby tree with a sudden, loud crash sounding, illuminating the entire garden with light. Moving with a sudden, quick shut sounding, the blinding flash of light forces Edgar to close his eyes. Reacting with a sudden, quick gasp sounding, Edgar fears the kidnapper will strike while he is blinded. Moving with a sudden, rhythmic wobble sounding, the attacker unexpectedly collapses onto the stone path. Claire stands behind the fallen man, holding a large, jagged piece of wood used to strike him. Moving with a sudden, quick throw sounding, Claire tosses the heavy wooden beam to the ground. Reaching out her hand, Claire asks the stunned knight if he is uninjured after the fight. Edgar looks up in disbelief at the prisoner who just saved him from the violent attacker. Claire calls out to Lord Edgar while he reacts with a sudden, quick gasp sounding. Moving with a sudden, soft rise sounding, Edgar stands and asks Claire why she is still here. Edgar explains the white-haired man reported she hadn't returned home, so he came to search for her. Claire reacts with a sudden, quick gasp sounding as she listens to the knight's surprising explanation. Edgar begins to remove his uniform coat, commandingly telling Claire that she should wear it. Moving with a sudden, quick shove sounding, Edgar insists she wear the heavy garment despite her protests. Claire dons the oversized coat while the knight stands beside her, looking alert in the ring. Edgar reveals Joanna reported the missing maids are gathered in the palace, and Claire was there too. Claire considers if Joanna knew the dark truth about the maid disappearances the entire time. Edgar tells Claire she must return home now, but she is surprised by his sudden order. Pointing at the fallen kidnapper, Edgar notes the man has clearly lost his sanity due to Gushin. Edgar suspects the man consumed Gushin and believes his aunt is deeply involved in the plot. The knight declares that finding the missing maids is the only way to prove his aunt's guilt. Letting out a sudden, quick gulp sounding, Claire reflects on the dangerous situation they now face. Edgar looks toward the Grand Palace, identifying it as their only chance to gather undeniable evidence. Claire firmly states her intention to accompany him, refusing to let him face the danger alone. Edgar worries about her exhaustion, but Claire explains she was officially assigned to investigate Gushin. Claire insists that they head toward the palace buildings at this very instant. Moving with a sudden, soft yes sounding, Edgar agrees and leads the way toward the castle. Letting out a sudden, rhythmic crackle sounding, the lightning-struck tree smolders against the dark sky. Moving with a series of rhythmic trudge soundings, armored guards patrol the quiet castle corridors. Letting out a sudden, quick choke sounding, a castle guard is stealthily neutralized from behind. Kneeling by the unconscious guard, Edgar notes the suspicious lack of staff present throughout the palace. Edgar realizes they have only encountered soldiers and haven't seen a single servant since entering. Claire finds the silence of the palace strange as she observes the empty hallway. Moving with a series of rhythmic rustle soundings, Edgar asks Claire where exactly she was held captive. Edgar remains silent and deep in thought as Claire describes her imprisonment in a dungeon-like room. Moving with a sudden, soft rise sounding, Edgar stands while Claire remains kneeling on the stone floor. Claire urgently requests to be taken to the dungeon while Edgar confidently accepts the task. The pair stops before a dark, ominous stone archway deep within the castle's interior. Edgar inquires about the guard presence, and Claire confirms she only saw one during her escape. Looking downcast, Claire offers an apology for her hurried actions during their previous desperate flight. Edgar gently reassures her, crediting their success in securing a witness entirely to her brave efforts. The two share a determined look before agreeing to proceed further into the dark corridors. They descend a narrow stone staircase, moving deeper into the bowels of the palace's hidden levels. Reaching a row of iron-barred cells, Edgar questions if this is the site of her imprisonment. Claire looks toward the dark cages and solemnly confirms they have reached the correct location. Edgar reaches for a wall fixture to light a torch, illuminating the grim, damp surroundings. Letting out a sudden, rhythmic crackle sounding, the torch flares to life in Edgar's steady grip. Following the long stone pathway, Edgar observes that the corridor extends far into the darkness. The pair moves cautiously through the hallway, their faces tense with the weight of the discovery. They walk past rows of heavy iron bars, highlighting the massive scale of the secret prison. Edgar questions his aunt's motives while Claire recalls another prisoner's warning about maids who never returned. Reflecting on the sinister fate of the missing staff, Edgar falls into a grim, thoughtful silence. Moving with a sudden, quick halt sounding, the two stop abruptly as something catches their attention. A massive, reinforced wooden door stands before them, blocking the path to the inner chamber. Edgar tests the heavy latch and realizes the entrance is securely locked from the outside. Letting out a sudden, loud bam sounding, Edgar throws his shoulder against the wood to no avail. Frustrated by the stubborn barrier, the dark-haired knight mutters an oath under his breath. Edgar wonders aloud how they will bypass the lock as Claire looks on with focused intensity. A sudden realization strikes Claire as she recalls a detail from her earlier encounter with the jailer. Moving with a sudden, quick dash sounding, Claire tells Edgar to wait and runs back alone. Claire returns moments later, triumphantly holding a heavy iron ring filled with several large keys. Edgar looks surprised, questioning where she managed to find the means to open the locked door. Claire explains she searched the prison area, assuming the jailer might have left his keys behind. Letting out a sudden, rhythmic grin sounding, Claire proudly presents the solution to their current obstacle. Edgar takes the ring, suggesting they methodically test each key until they find the correct match. Letting out a series of sudden, quick click soundings, the knight tries several keys in the lock. Edgar lets out a sigh of relief as the mechanism finally turns, yielding to his efforts. Letting out a sudden, quick creak sounding, the heavy door slowly swings open into a dark room. They enter the secret chamber, scanning the crates and boxes scattered throughout the dimly lit space. Edgar pries open a wooden container and reacts with a sudden, quick gasp of pure shock. Claire leans in to see the contents, her face paling as she realizes what they found. Rows of small glass bottles filled with glowing red liquid reveal the illicit production of Gushin. Moving with a sudden, quick zoom sounding, a mysterious figure looms behind the unsuspecting Claire. Letting out a sudden, loud crash sounding, Edgar pulls Claire away as an attack strikes the floor. Letting out a sudden, rhythmic crackle sounding, flames erupt as Edgar shields Claire from the blast. A sharp-eyed man with blonde hair and a cold expression steps out from the swirling shadows. The blonde man greets them with a chilling smile, seemingly unbothered by their intrusive discovery. Claire realizes this man is Edgar's brother, though she finds their lack of resemblance quite striking. The blonde man questions their presence, while Edgar declares he is investigating the suspicious items found. The blonde-haired man explains the family's financial desperation led them to engage in trade with a merchant. Letting out a sudden, loud laughter sounding, the blonde man claims their actions will save the family. The blonde man dismisses Edgar's concerns, ordering him to stop interfering with their essential business matters. Gesturing dismissively, the man mocks Edgar's lack of understanding regarding the complexities of their commerce. Letting out a sudden, loud clank sounding, Edgar draws his sword as a blue aura manifests. Reacting with a sudden, quick gasp sounding, the blonde man demands to know Edgar's next move. Edgar questions his brother if their family business involves the illegal trade of selling banned drugs. The knight declares that he cannot overlook such a serious crime, regardless of the personal cost. Letting out a sudden, quick gulp sounding, the blonde man looks visibly shaken by the accusation. The blonde man shouts that Edgar won't escape consequences, warning him not to joke about their situation. Moving with a sudden, quick dash sounding, the blonde man flees into the darkness to escape.
Claire gasps as Edgar decides there is no need to pursue the fleeing man at this moment.
Letting out a sudden, rhythmic crackle sounding, a lone wall torch provides light in the hallway. Claire smiles as she holds up the transaction records for the illicit Gushin trade they finally secured.
Edgar remains silent as he carefully reviews the incriminating documents Claire retrieved from the secret room.
Edgar commands they depart immediately, prompting Claire to ask where they are heading next. Looking toward the upper levels, Edgar states they will now pay a visit to the Queen.
Claire wonders if they have reached the Queen's private chambers as they stand before a door.
The pair stops before a set of massive, ornate double doors leading into the royal interior.
Letting out a series of rhythmic knock soundings, Edgar announces their arrival at the Queen's chamber.
Letting out a sudden, quick creak sounding, the heavy doors slowly swing open into a red-lit room.
Moving with a sudden, soft whoosh sounding, a woman with orange blonde hair stands amidst a field of roses. Reacting with a sudden, quick ugh sounding, Claire covers her nose as she notes the room reeks of blood. Moving with a series of rhythmic step soundings, Edgar enters the room and addresses the woman as Auntie. Greeting Edgar, his aunt notes it has been a while, but chides him for entering unannounced and improper. The orange-haired woman stares coldly, questioning if Edgar believes his sudden intrusion is considered proper conduct. Moving with a series of rhythmic step soundings, Edgar offers a brief apology for his rudeness. The woman remarks that Edgar has changed significantly during the time they have spent apart. Moving with a sudden, soft brush sounding, she gently touches his face, noting how much he has grown. Recalling his adorable childhood, she continues her affection while Edgar calls out to her and Claire watches. Moving with a sudden, quick grab sounding, she notes a sweet fragrance surrounds the knight. Remembering his childhood love for sweets, she asks if he is carrying a bonbon for her. Edgar asks if she knows of a drug named Gushin, but she claims to have no knowledge. Edgar reveals he has evidence with him, specifically a bottle he found hidden in the palace basement. The knight holds up a small glass bottle filled with a vibrant, glowing pink liquid. Letting out a sudden, soft fuss sounding, she dismisses the evidence as an ordinary, harmless tonic. Edgar insists on taking the bottle to the knight's order for a thorough and official investigation. The woman claims his behavior isn't funny, but Edgar asserts he is not joking about the situation. The knight declares his duty prevents him from leaving such a dangerous drug in her possession. Edgar mentions the Sowell incident, insisting that proper research must be conducted on the substance they found. Letting out a sudden, quick sounding, the woman grabs Edgar with a rhythmic shake sounding. Shouting for Edgar to release her, she pulls away with a sudden, quick yank sounding. Turning away, she warns Edgar not to be foolish or destroy their household with his sense of justice. Edgar firmly states his belief isn't stupid and insists that his aunt must be judged for her actions. Edgar notes a strong stench has been mixed with the room's sweet perfume since they first entered. The knight looks directly at her, asking if the underlying stench is actually the smell of blood.
Edgar calls out to his aunt again, his expression hardening as he prepares to confront her further.
He demands to know what happened to the maids who were transferred to this specific palace. Claire peeks through the doorway, confused as she wonders what maids Edgar is referring to. Edgar repeats his demand, asking his aunt exactly what she is doing in this suspicious room. Reacting with a sudden, quick clack sounding, Claire draws her sword to remain alert for an attack. Claire cautiously enters the room further, scanning the dark corners for any signs of hidden danger. Reacting with a sudden, quick flinch sounding, Claire spots a rapid movement coming from the shadows. Letting out a sudden, loud crash sounding, a massive weapon strikes the wall right behind Claire. Letting out a series of rhythmic laughter soundings, a sinister presence reveals itself in the darkness. An elderly woman with gray hair and a red dress glares while wielding a massive blood-stained axe. Claire realizes the elderly woman is from a previous encounter and stares in stunned disbelief. Letting out a sudden, rhythmic swing sounding, the old woman brings her massive axe down forcefully. Letting out a sudden, soft fuh sounding, the sinister woman glares at the blonde-haired knight. Letting out a sudden, quick slash sounding, the attacker shouts while swinging her axe at Claire.
Letting out a sudden, loud shout sounding, the woman leaps at Edgar with her weapon raised. Claire signals for a decisive strike as she prepares to counter the old woman's relentless assault.
Letting out a sudden, rhythmic swing sounding, a powerful clash erupts as Claire reacts with alarm. Letting out a sudden, loud thud sounding, the woman crashes down as several shouts of surprise echo.